Hey, folks, you're going to enjoy this one. I just had a conversation with Bryan Dawson from 1819 News, president and CEO of an up-and-coming company that is making a huge splash in the state of Alabama. But listen, you're going to be amazed by his personal story. Bryan Dawson, you talk about rags to riches. You talk about somebody who's been redeemed. You're talking about a guy who was looking at life in prison, who now has an amazing family, an amazing life, an amazing testimony of how the Lord has redeemed him, and who is, oh, by the way, making a huge difference in our state. Stay tuned. Just Right podcast coming up next. Yeah, let's do a show.
1, 2, 3, hey!
Bryan Dawson, how you doing?
Doing good.
Good. I got notes, dude.
All right.
I'm gonna start with a sort of introduction. All right.
Hit me.
You was born and raised outside the state of Alabama. Spent a lot of your time in Colorado Springs. Am I right?
Yep. And Derby, Kansas. Those are the two places.
Does that make you a carpetbagger if you came from out west?
No, west is not north.
Okay.
So, yeah, carpetbaggers only come from the north.
All right. So you're allowed.
Yeah.
You were a white suburban kid.
Correct.
But your parents divorced when you're young. I know that. I can relate to that. But then there's this period of your life. We'll talk about it in detail here in a minute. You've been very candid in some of the other interviews and discussions I've even had with you. Crime, drugs, drinking.
Sure.
And then there became time when you were even involved with drug cartels and other things and spent time in prison.
Yep.
At one point, I know you were facing like just short of 400 years potentially in prison. But then you found Jesus. You found a beautiful woman. You found purpose. You found parenthood like 7 times.
Correct.
It's
the number of completion, Phil.
Oh, well, there you
They
go.
say perfection and completion.
Speaking of which, we're going to get to the initials of all your kids' names too, which is very cool. And then now it's radio, media, 1819 News, president and CEO. So let's start. All right, let's just talk about it.
Yeah.
Early childhood, dude. How did you get to where you went?
Yeah. So, interesting thing, I always like to, the more I learn about people and get to know people and everything, I realize who they are, where they're from, who their parents are matters a lot. And I also think, well, I'll just kind of go into that. So my dad is from West Monroe, Louisiana. He is a swamp redneck. He grew up with Phil Robertson.
Duck Dynasty.
Duck Dynasty, okay.
Yeah.
Phil was about 7 years my dad's senior, and so Phil was the camp counselor at Camp Chioka in Louisiana. And so, my dad was like 10 and Phil was like 17 at the summer camp or whatever. But my grandma, Memu, as we call her, Betty Dawson, taught Sunday school with Miss Kay for 30 years at Whites Ferry Road Church of Christ in West Monroe, Louisiana. So I say all that because it's neat on one hand that my family is close with their family or whatever, but also to give you, like, everybody knows the Robertsons and the swamp redneck thing, right? Like, they're swamp rednecks with money. But prior to them having money, there was a saying in West Monroe that the only people that were more poor than the Dawsons was the Robertsons. Okay, and the Dawsons was po, like they were super poor. Okay, I would joke and say
They changed that over time.
yeah, so they did. My dad not so much. That's okay though. Went the middle class route, but my dad, swamp redneck from Louisiana. Grew up. I always say back when poor people were skinny, had to hunt for food, garden, like so. That's that side of my family. And then on the other side, there's my mom. My mom, and we'll kind of get into a little bit more of her background later in the story as it's pertinent, but she was the daughter of a state senator in Colorado Springs specifically. And so my grandfather was a state senator. He ran for governor. He ended up running for Congress against Joel Heffley in Colorado. That was the only politics I was around for. All that happened before I was born, except for the run for Congress. And he has a country club background, right? And so you mix this swamp redneck with this country club, and this is where you get this amazing pedigree that sits before you.
Had this sort of Romeo and Juliet feel to it.
Yeah, I guess so. But that I really do think that plays a lot into who I am and how I go about things. But for better or for worse. But yeah, so they couldn't have been more different, and they got divorced when I was 2, right? Like who didn't see the writing on the wall with that one? So they got divorced when I was 2. Courts put me with my mom. That's kind of the knee-jerk reaction of the court system. At least it was back then. I don't think it's changed that much now. The knee-jerk reaction is give kids to mom. And had they have done any type of due diligence whatsoever and looked into the situation, they would have seen that was not the best place for me. And so when I was 2 years old, boom, I'm now living with my mom, seeing my dad every other weekend. And
where were y'all living then?
This was Colorado Springs. Okay. Yep. And so, my mom, God bless her, I love her. She did the best she could with what she had, right? And so I've worked through a lot of unforgiveness with my mom and with my dad, and but just forgiving them and me thinking, oh, I've forgiven them, but it's like, no, really. And then once you've forgiven them, you can actually see the appreciation that they did everything they possibly could. Now that I have kids, I see. But my mom had a very rough childhood, though she was from country club, lineage. She was sexually abused as a child. She, had all kinds of abuse, and just horrible. And, so she had a lot of trauma in her life that she never dealt with. And so I'm living with her, and the solution to every problem that she has is another man. And so I ended up with like 5 or 6 stepdads. I lost count. Okay. Now I will say, I know there's no way you haven't seen the movie or read the book, Hillbilly Elegy.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So that was my life to a T with my mom. That was my life to a T. We watched that movie, and my mother and I were like, this is like maybe 6 months ago we watched the movie.
Together?
No. Okay. But I mean, I watched it. I was a wreck. My wife's looking at me. My oldest son, who's watched it with us is like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, yeah. It was a wreck. And I told my mom about it. My mom watched it, and she's like, oh my gosh. It was like PTSD watching it because it was so on point with that 2 to 10 years with my mom. And I always make the joke, me and JD Vance are the same person, except JD Vance, he got into the Marines and went to Yale, and I got into drugs and went to jail. But other than that, same person. But yeah, and so when I was that went on, watching my mom get drunk, taking pharmaceutical drugs, I watched her get beat by some of the men that she was with. Just not good formative years from 2 to 10, right? And so by the time I'm 10, I get into a big fight with my mom, and she, despite many court battles for my dad to get custody of me that he continued to lose, my mom just let go and said, you can go live with your dad. And so when I was 10, I went and moved with my dad, and he was living in Wichita, Kansas. He worked at Cessna for the bulk of his career in Wichita, Kansas.
So I got to tell you, and sometime I'll tell you my whole story, but I didn't wind up in jail, but I was headed there.
Yeah.
Parents divorced when I was young, lived with my mom, did not respond well to multiple marriages. Mom finally gave me the ultimatum as we had a big blow up. She sent me to live with Dad, who, by the way, was living in London, England, as an Army officer. And so I like to say God had to give me a 3-year timeout away from everything that I was used to for me to find him.
Yeah.
Of course, you had a 384-year timeout coming.
Potentially, yeah.
So let me ask you, you're living with your dad. I researched before I sit down with you, and I'm watching other interviews you've done and stuff. And you said in one case that your dad's level of discipline and household, management was more what you needed, but you still wound up going down some roads.
Sure.
So you were, and I got to say, in going through all the news stories and things, your mugshot came up at some point.
A bunch, yeah.
And you were just a normal looking high school dude. You didn't have like body piercings and face tats, and you weren't doing gang signs in the mugshot. You just looked like a high school football player, which you were. Am I right?
Yeah.
But you also had this sideline gig of doing things that got you in big trouble.
Yeah. No, I'm an all-in guy. Whatever I'm into, I'm all into it, and that's just the way I'm wired, and it was no different than that. And so, going to the structure that my dad provided, but me still falling, I think that was a great tee up. I've never thought about it in those terms, and it actually makes a lot of sense. So, I'm 10. I move in with my dad. He's still not a Christian to this day. So if you're listening, pray for my dad. But he put a roof over my head. He got up every day at 4:30 in the morning and went to work. He showed up to my football games. We ate dinner every night around the table. Okay. He was what he was supposed to be as a father, and he didn't have a father. His dad abandoned them, his siblings. So he never had a dad. And so the gaps that he was filling in were those real basic gaps that he completely lacked, which was the providing, the protecting, those type of things. And so he generationally fixed that, that basic blocking and tackling gap that a father is supposed to provide. But some of the areas where I'd say, and I don't mean this disparagingly, where he fell short, he's not a real good communicator where he can sit down and say, son, let me talk to you about manhunters. Son, let me talk like that. Those weren't his things. He showed up and he did what he was supposed to do. And I'm very, very grateful that I had the time with him that I did. It definitely shaped and molded me. But when from 2 to 10, which they call formative years, those are formative years, right? And your formative years are not very formative. You carry baggage. And so I'm with my dad in this structure, carrying that baggage. And so I would get straight A's on the report cards, and I thrived in that structure, and I did good in sports. But underneath, I was angry. And my stepmom would always tell me, she's like, "You're so angry. Why are you so angry?" And she didn't understand. And I was angry at the world. And I was never really comfortable in my own skin. I had a lot of insecurity issues. And the only time I ever felt comfortable in my own skin is when I drank and did drugs. And so I drank and did drugs a lot.
Sort of a self-medicating kind of thing?
I definitely think it was a self-medicating thing. And once I kind of dove into that, I became the life of the party. I created a fake ID. I've always been somewhat, innovative. I learned how to create a fake ID, and then I could go get everybody alcohol. So I was like the coolest guy, in school. I could go get everybody booze and, party. But like everybody else would like party and go home and be fine. I would drink to the point of blacking out and not remember what I did. And that would happen 2 or 3 times a week, right? Like I was like a wild party animal. And then that went on to the point where I started to do drugs. And same thing, whatever I do, I do it all the way. And that happened there. And
But you didn't just do it, you were selling them too, right?
Yeah. And so how it started is, a little bit of weed, selling a little bit of weed, whatever. And then I would experiment with a little bit of cocaine or methamphetamines or ecstasy or whatever. And in that experimenting phase, I was still living in a suburb of Wichita called Derby, Kansas, with my dad. And
I got siblings, by the way?
So I've got, from my mom, I have a brother who has a different dad.
Okay.
And he's Brad, and he's 2 years, 2 months, 2 days older than me. Anyway, probably not pertinent to the story, but it's interesting. And then I have a stepbrother. When my dad remarried, he remarried a woman, my stepmom, who had a son that was my exact age. So we were in the same schools together growing up.
Okay, wow, yeah.
Yeah. And he was also into partying and doing things, and also found himself in prison at some point in his life. So, I always want to go down rabbit trails, and it's like, I'm not going to rabbit trail, I promise. So that experimenting with some of those more illicit drugs, I snuck out one night to do that, and I came home after sneaking out thinking that because what I would do is I would sneak out, my bedroom would be shut, my dad would just get up and go to work. Well, he, for whatever reason that morning, needed something, and so he came in my room, and I wasn't in there. He's like, So I got busted sneaking out. And he took me to get a drug test, and I peed hot for every single thing on the drug test. And he was like, "Oh, wow." And so we kind of locked horns over that. And he said, "You need to quit football and go to rehab," which is a really big deal. My team ended up 6A in Kansas, is as big as it gets. They don't have 7A there. Yeah. And we were predicted to be the 6A state champs, or at least going to state.
What position?
I was defensive end, and they were going to move me to nose tackle that year. Which was really interesting. I was like 225 and ran a 4.840, but they wanted me inside. Anyway, I won't get into that, but yeah. So that was my, I was really, really excited about my senior year, years and years of playing football, wanted to do that. And he's telling me I got to quit to go to rehab, or I can quit football and go live with my mom in Colorado again. And so I packed up all my stuff, my car, and I drove to Colorado. And that was the biggest mistake of my life.
So mine wound up being the most impetuous good decision I ever made, because I got caught sneaking out of the house. So I was drinking and smoking starting in 4th grade. Yeah. And mine wasn't self-medicating, I don't think. And it wasn't a lot. Yeah. But it was there. And I was hanging out with a bunch of pot smokers. And mine was more along the lines of, you said I can't, so I'm gonna. Yeah. You said I can't, so this is what I'm gonna do. Sure. And it was just like that live on the edge kind of sense, 4th grade though. Yeah. I mean, who does that at 11 years old? But nonetheless, Mom caught me sneaking out of the house in 7th grade again, and gave me the ultimatum: what do you want to do here? You want to go live with your dad? And I just went, yeah. I mean, that was it. There was no thought. There was no preconceived, I've been looking for this opportunity. There was no, I think this is a good idea. It was just get back at Mom. Yeah. And so I said, yeah. Just the opposite, though. Mine wound up being the best decision I could have made. Totally impetuous. Yeah. But I did it. So you wind up in Colorado, though, brother. Yeah. Colorado weren't good for you.
No, that's 2002. Go back to Colorado. Start, I was already about 3 weeks into my senior year in Kansas in my football season. So I uprooted and moved to Colorado, and then went to school sort of. Like I didn't hardly ever go to school. By the time I moved in with my mom, it was free reign. I could do whatever I want. But my brother was driving for a drug dealer And so I would ride around with them and watch him. He'd have, stacks of cash. All the guys wanted to be him. All the girls wanted to be with him. Pounds of drugs, like what's not to love, like this is, kind of the thing I'm infatuated with. And here's this guy doing this. And so I kind of went to work for him selling a little bit of weed. And then I started getting into cocaine. Cocaine's expensive. In order to do cocaine, you have to sell cocaine. And I always say, when I tell my story, the same thing that makes me good at what I do for a living now, which is sales, networking, and persuasion, it's the same skill set I was using then, the exact same thing. And so I went in a very short amount of time from selling, little bits of marijuana to next thing you know, I'm selling cocaine, and next thing you know, I'm selling lots of cocaine. And in a period of 5 years, I racked up 6 felonies, and all of it was drug or stealing things to buy drugs or getting in a high-speed chase with the cops or whatever. But I, went from selling little bits of marijuana to the point where I was pushing large amounts of cocaine and methamphetamines for cartels in Colorado Springs.
That's before it was all legal out in Colorado.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Now they let you take over apartment complexes.
Yeah, exactly.
Just,
now you can just bring your gang and have at it.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So, and going through getting ready to sit down with you today, and I've heard your story before, but I've never heard all of your story before.
Sure.
But you didn't just go to prison. You were on the run for a while, and
Sure.
then they caught you swinging on a rope out the window trying to get away from a drug bust.
Yeah.
And I am of the understanding that at some point, Dog the Bounty Hunter was offered the opportunity to track you down, and he declined.
Yes, and I don't think he declined. I don't think he based off of. Well, so I'll just tell the story. That's
You
what
have
we
to.
do.
Now
That's
that
what we
I've
do.
asked
We have to
about
tell
it.
stories. Yeah. So here I am. I've now racked up 6 felonies. That 6th felony was the doozy. Okay, and the 6th felony was, I was already out on bond. I was already on probation, and I'd been up for 3 or 4 days. Found out one of these guys who had informed the cops about some legal activity that I was involved with. Found out that he had just come into some money, and he owed me money, and he also narked on me, right? And so in that world, you don't do that. Those are the rules, okay? You don't do that. If you want to play in this society, you don't do that. Now, a lot of people did, but there was an enforcement mechanism called me, okay? And if you're going to do that to me, I'm going to find you, and I'm going to hurt you. That was the way it worked. And he wasn't the only one that I did that to, but he was the one that ended up telling the cops again. So I went to his house. I'd been up for 3 days, strung out on meth, pound on his door. He answers the door. I said, he's like, "Hey, man, what's going on?" I just immediately said, "Why'd you tell on me?" "And I didn't tell on you. I walked into his house, pushed him. "Why'd you tell on me?" "I didn't tell on you." And I just started to beat him relentlessly. And the guy that I was with, so the way that it reads in the charges, and it's because they only wanted me to go down. They didn't care about the other guy that was with me. I was their target, okay, for the cops, law enforcement. I was the one running all these drug rings and theft rings and motorcycle theft rings and all this stuff. So they were after me, and I wasn't going to tell on the guy that was with me. But this is what actually happened versus what if you read the articles online and the charges and stuff. I was tasing him and beating him and tasing him with a taser and beating him, trying to get him to admit that he told on me. Well, the guy that was with me had a blackjack, which is it's not makeshift, like you can buy them. Yeah. It's got like a mechanical spring inside of it with a heavy piece of lead with leather wrapped around it. Yeah. And he hit him square in the forehead with it. Boom, his head explodes. Blood goes everywhere. Was not the intention of that visit, okay? My intention, I actually was friends with the guy and liked the guy, but he had broken the rules. And so I was in there to make sure that he understood that you don't do this. The guy I was with cracked his head open, blood went everywhere, and I'm like, well, at this point we're done, okay, this is over. And after he got hit in the head with that, he admitted that he told on me. That happened, but that was not the intention of this meeting, was to go that serious and that far, but it did. And once it did, I just started grabbing computers and anything that was of value. I told his brother, I said, "Look, if you guys don't pay us, pay me the money that you owe me, I'm going to be back, and that's going to be you." And I walked out. And so they hit me with attempted murder, aggravated robbery, and extortion. That night I got arrested again.
That's go-away charges right there.
Those are go-away charges, yeah, for a long time. And it was my 6th felony, right? So my 6th time I've been arrested and charged in separate cases. And so I got arrested that night. I went to court basically, and they dropped the attempted murder down to first degree because it didn't fit. And so my arraignment, I don't know what they call it. You're a lawyer. I'm not. Although after being in prison for a little while, you actually kind of turn into one. But they dropped it to first degree assault. And so I was charged with first degree assault, aggravated robbery, and extortion, and a slew of other things. But those were the heaters. And so I'm in there for 2 weeks, and I get bonded out again. And so now I'm out on several $100,000. No, I think it was like $135,000 worth of bonds, if I remember correctly.
Who posted bond?
There's so many rabbit trails I could go all the way down. I just don't know how interesting they are. There's this girl, I think her name was Lisa, that she was just infatuated with me and thought the world of me. And she went and used a credit card to buy a bunch of Xbox 360s that were out at the time, and then sold them and got the money to bond me out.
No kidding.
No one's ever got that story, Phil. You're the first that got that story. That asked that question. There you go. But yeah, I ended up bonding out, and knew immediately that if I go to court, I'm going to prison for the rest of my life. So I'm not going to court, which now makes me a fugitive because I missed my court date. Right? I'm on the run. And the plan was, I had a friend, Spider. He and I were supposed to, and Spider's a very bad dude, like very, very bad, Hispanic guy who's part of the Sereno gang. And we were supposed to go down to California with his people and then go into Mexico. That's what they do on the movies. We felt like it was a good idea. Only problem is we never got around to doing it. And so I ended up on a number of occasions, the cops ended up finding where I was, but they didn't have a warrant and they weren't sure. And so there's a couple different ways that I was able to get away when I was on the run.
Yeah.
And that infuriated them. Okay.
This is how long? Like several weeks?
Yeah, it was about 2 or 3 weeks. Yep. And so you had, at the time, there was Officer Mork and Officer Gold Branson, which were with Colorado Springs Police Department. But then you had Sergeant O'Driscoll, who was the head of the Fugitive Task Force and Crime Prevention Unit.
You still remember their names?
Yes, I do. And there's a story in that
this?
too. This would have been 2007.
Oh.
Yeah, and so Sergeant O'Driscoll and his team, not only was he on the Fugitive Task Force, he was part of the Crime Prevention Unit. So even before I was a fugitive, both Mork and Gold Branson and Sergeant O'Driscoll and his team, they were dedicated to bringing me in and taking me down. Okay. Because of, the threat that I posed in running these crime rings or whatever. And but the Crime Prevention Unit and Fugitive Task Force, it was ran by Sergeant O'Driscoll. They ended up, they have like unlimited budget, work with the feds, all this other stuff. And so they were on me. And so I got away a couple times, and finally June 19th, 2007, I am in what we deemed my safe house, and Spider had given me a nylon rappelling rope to tie to the bottom of this 70s retro recliner. And he's like, if you got to get out, you go, because the front door is, there's a hallway in these apartments, and then you go from the hallway into the apartment, and the only way out would be down the window, out the window and down on the ground, and it's third story. And I'm like, I'm never going to use that. That's crazy, but I did. Every 18 inches, I tied a double knot, so I could climb like that. And, I woke up June 19th, 2007, not thinking anything, just another day of being on the run. And I was in my living room.
One of your interviews, you said you woke up at 3 in the afternoon.
Yeah, it was that afternoon. And it was that afternoon. I was, again, smoking weed, doing drugs, and, your circadian rhythm gets a little off in that situation. And so woke up that afternoon. It's the weird thing that you remember. I was cooking bratwurst and watching the Chappelle Show. And I looked out the window, and the way that it's set up, there's an apartment building here. And every year I go to Colorado Springs and I take my family. And this year I took my 15-year-old son, and he's heard me tell this story a million times. And I'm like, here's the bill. He's like, this is just like the building you said. I said, yeah, no, it's because it's where it happened. Okay, like I'm telling you. And we go and we look, and there's an apartment building right here. This is the apartment building I'm in. And I saw the front end of a cop car sticking out. And I knew, okay, they're here. They're here. And so I kind of frantically, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Well, then all of a sudden I hear, boom, 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 Colorado Springs police, open up. They kick in the door. And I look, it wasn't my door. So I said, they don't know which apartment I'm in. They're kicking in every single door in the apartment on the third floor. All they knew is I was on the third floor. And so you've been in Afghanistan and Iraq. They're clearing rooms as though this was Afghanistan trying to find me, okay, in an apartment complex.
Yeah.
Boom, okay. I'm like, okay, well, I look at the rope, and this is my only option. And so I kick the screen out, throw my backpack out with all my stuff, and the only piece of furniture in the whole place was the TV and the retro recliner. Okay, that was it. And so I wrap the rope around my hand, and I jump boom, and it sticks exactly how it's supposed to. It's, you know, wedged in the window, and I'm hanging there. Well, what I didn't know, in that back parking lot, there was a surveillance van.
Oh, yeah.
That blends in with the rest of the, you wouldn't have known it was a cop car or whatever. It was a surveillance van. And they called it in. You know, someone's trying to jump out the window. I think we got our guy. And then 50 or 60 cops, they weren't going to miss me again, come swarming from the outside. Like, you couldn't see them because they were right here.
So the jig was up at that point.
The jig was up. Yeah, the gun's drawn, get on the ground, as though I had another option. You know, gravity necessitated that down was the direction I was going to go. And so I unwrapped my hand, fell, and hit the ground. Thankfully, didn't break anything. They put their knee in my back, cuffed me, put me in the back of the cop car, and that was it. June 19th, 2007.
So I'm fascinated by two things in the story.
Sure.
One is you still remember the cops' names.
There's a story for why, but go ahead.
Well, and then I may get back to that story.
Yeah.
But the other is you take your kids and you show them exactly where this happened.
Yeah.
So we're going to get a lot into, you know, you're obviously a different person today.
Sure.
I know the guy who did those things, but I don't know the guy who did those things because you're a different person. But that being said, you're pretty transparent with, and you have 7 kids, by the way.
Yeah.
You're a prolific breeder,
Yes.
but nonetheless, you've got a beautiful family, 7 kids, but you're telling them what's happened in your life.
Mm-hmm.
What's can I ask you real quick? What's their response when they hear about Dad before they knew Dad?
This is a great, it's a great platform to share the gospel with your kids, right? But the older ones, it's a warning. Proverbs talks about the fool. Dad was a fool, right? I was the epitome of the fool, and you know, in Proverbs and really throughout the scriptures, it talks about a fool. And I didn't seek wise counsel. I didn't receive instruction. I didn't receive discipline. I didn't any of those things. I rejected all of it, and this is where I ended up. And so I don't think it's set. So I've got a 15-year-old, got a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old. Okay. The 15-year-old, the 10-year-old, the 9-year-old are the ones that really wrap their minds around what I'm talking about when I talk about being in prison and, you know, cops chasing me and that kind of stuff. The rest of the ones are younger, and they're just like, wow, Dad, you used to be bad, but now you're good. You know, like they don't have any rebut. It will eventually form like their understanding, and it's something that I want them to always know. And the thing I always point them to is like, 1, don't be the fool, receive instruction, receive wise counsel, obey God and obey your parents. But also, life isn't perfect, and if you stray, you can never stray so far that God can't get you, right? And if God saved me, He can save anybody, and that's not cliche. It's literally, let me tell you about something. But again, specifically my 15-year-old, I drive him all around Colorado Springs. There's not a corner I didn't commit a felony in that city, okay? And I drive him, and I'm like, I did this here, I did this here, I did this here, I did this here. Like, this is who I was. You need to know and understand that, right? And so,
Proverbs 19, raise up a child the way they should go.
Yep.
When they get old, they won't depart from it.
Yep.
All right, brother. So you, the jig was up. They got you. The officers whose names you still recall were a part of the task force that brought you in, and you're staring at 6 felonies prior before you even got to this point, and now you've got this stack of felonies, and you're looking at 384 years potentially. Sure. So you're looking at life in prison at that point.
Correct. Yeah.
But you negotiated.
Yeah.
Did you negotiate for yourself, or did your lawyer do a good job?
There's a mix, but there's a bunch between that. But yeah, it gets into mediation. But there was 9 months between then, and in those 9 months, they take me to county jail. I'm facing 384 years in prison. At least that's how my public defender described it, because how it works, and the numbers are shaky in my head, but I have to do the math. But either way, each charge that I was charged with gets doubled because I was on probation and on bond, so they can double it, so they enhance it.
Yeah.
And then they times it. They can times it by 4 because it's the habitual criminal.
Yeah.
Right. And so I can break it all down with math or whatever. But the habitual criminal. So if you have 3 felonies, they call that. I'm not going to say what they call it. It's the B word, the little B word. And if it's 4 or more, you get they quadruple your sentence, and they call that the big B word. Okay, habitual. Anyway, so I was at 6, so I'm times 4, and then so they stack, and then they times it by 4, and then that's where that comes from.
This is state, not federal, right?
State, Colorado State. Yep. Federal state prison.
It didn't wind up being 384 years, but you still got a pretty stiff sentence.
Got a pretty stiff sentence, and the transformation really began in county jail. So I was in county jail for 9 months, basically holding out, and that's part of your negotiations in county jail. I was like, well, I'll just sit here until you bring me a deal that I want, right? And they'll only do that for so long. But it is, some people just want to get in there and they plea and they go to prison, But I was gonna, bide my time or whatever. Well, I'm now in county jail thinking I'm gonna go do the rest of my life in prison. That's how I'm seeing this. And so I'm in there thinking I have to create this reputation of being a bad dude so when I get to prison, people won't mess with me. And so I do, and I'm hanging out with all the wrong people in there. I catch one assault case. They put me in the hole, then send me to another unit. I'm there for a little bit. They bring in another guy that had told on one of my friends. And I had to go beat him up really, really bad. Caught another assault case. So I caught 2 assault cases in county jail. So on top of all my other stuff, I caught 2 more assault cases. They were misdemeanor assaults, but they're still assault cases. And they put me in administrative segregation after that. So they're like, okay, you don't play nice with others.
That's solitary, basically.
Solitary,
right?
Correct. Exactly what it is. Yep. Solitary confinement. You're in a cell by yourself for 23 hours a day. You get an hour out to make a phone call and take a shower, maybe do some push-ups or whatever, and you go back to your cell. That's what you get. And I was in there for about 4 months, okay? And so it was 9 months total, 5 months out, 4 months in ADSEG or solitary. And in that stay in solitary, God began to open my eyes. I don't believe he saved me yet, but he opened my eyes to the fact it was my fault that I was in there. And this is huge. I was just reading Rick Burgess's new book last night because I'm going to interview him later today. But that was one of the chapters when it talks about just rugged accountability. Like you have to take accountability for your actions if you're ever going to repent. And this was the beginning of me realizing, because up to that point, I blame my mom for my circumstances. I blame my dad. I blame the judge. I blame the cops. Da 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 da.
No more victim.
Exactly. But what was wild though, I really believed I was a victim. Like I wasn't just saying that to get out of trouble. I really believed it, which is weird. But God, in his mercy, opened my eyes like, no, dummy, this is your fault. Sure, does your mom and your dad play a role? And oh, yeah. But your choices got you here. They didn't beat that guy up. They didn't jump out the window. They didn't, sell drugs. They didn't do those things. You did those things. Yeah. And so when I realized that my bad choices created the bad circumstances, that was extremely liberating, because what it meant is that I was free to make good choices that would then create good circumstances. And it was like this epiphany that went off in my brain. And so as much as you can in a cell by yourself, I began to start taking ownership of my thoughts, feelings, behaviors, decisions, all that kind of stuff. So much so that my family really began to because I would have a phone call a week. That's all they would give me. Not that I could call them every day on my hour out if I wanted, but my family would pick up the phone once a week. They'd cut me off. I'd burned every bridge.
Wow.
And in those weekly phone calls, my family started to notice a huge change in my attitude.
Who'd you call?
My grandma Barb.
Okay.
Yep. And I would call my grandma Barb, and usually it would be on Sunday night, and my mom would be over there, and my brother would be over there, and and so they'd pass the phone around or whatever, and I'd talk. But they specifically, my grandma Barb is like, something's changed in him, and everyone, and a lot of people in the family told grandma she was crazy. You just got a soft spot for Brian, whatever. But she's like, no, I feel like something's changed. And
is that your dad's mom or your mom's mom?
That's my mom's mom.
Okay.
Yep. Meanwhile, my dad's mom, the one that was teaching Sunday school for Miss K, Scott Beeson, when he interviewed me, said, who was praying for you? It was a good question. I said, well, Betty Dawson was. And lots of credit goes to her for that. But Grandma Barb, she began to really believe in me and believe that there was a change that had happened, so much so that she, so in this time period, that 4 months that I'm in there, I guess about 3 months into my ADSEG stay, my public defender came and said, okay, Brian, the district attorney, she was like really excited to give me this deal like it was a good one.
Your attorney was?
Yes, public pretender. And she comes and says, Brian, this is great. If you sign this deal, you're only going to get 32 years with a crime of violence. And I'm like, amazing. When you're 23, 384 and 32, there's not a lot of difference, right? And so I was not real excited about that. So I called my grandma and I said, I'm going to prison for the rest of my life. Because the way it works in Colorado, it's way different than it is in Alabama. On a 32-year sentence with a crime and violence sentence enhancer, which is another way that you have a crime of violence, so they stack your sentences, then they aggravate it, and then they multiply it. So it's basically they're just going to throw everything they can at you. If you go to trial, and she explains this to me, if you go to trial, this is what they can do to you. But I tell my grandma I'm going to prison for the rest of my life, and she reaches out to these attorneys. She's got a little bit of money. She doesn't got a lot of money. She just reached out to these attorneys. They're like 60 grand, 120 grand, 150 grand to represent. You know, he's got 6 felonies.
I'm underbilling myself apparently as an attorney.
Yes. Well, if you get into criminal law and you got a guy with 6 felonies, you should probably charge more. But they're like, you know, and she's like, well, I can't afford any of that. And I said, go talk to Jeff Barker. Jeff Barker's got a great reputation for being kind of an up and coming new lawyer who's just really, really good. And she goes and sits down with him, and he's like, look, best I can do is $10,000, and if he goes to trial, I need another 10. My grandma says, I don't have another 10. He's like, well, he ain't going to trial, so I'm not that worried about it, right? So he's like, okay, $10,000, and so he ends up becoming my attorney, and this is we're a little bit long for him, so I'm going to go into some of this because this is really cool. I've never told this part of the story in any media hits, and so now I'm up against the wall when I try to retain this attorney. The next day, I've got to take my plea or I've got to go to trial. So they've got witnesses showing up for my trial that day. So if I don't take the plea, I go to trial.
You're down to knuckle dragging.
Knuckle dragging. And you're an attorney. You kind of know how some of this stuff works. Yeah. The judge says, you don't get a new attorney, buddy. No, he's not your attorney. Your attorney is this lady, and you either sign the plea or you go to trial. So I'm like, my grandma's like, my new supposed to be attorney's like, and the public defender comes over and she's like, hey, I don't know how this happened, but the one of the witnesses in the case got stuck in traffic or whatever, and she's not going to be able to be here. She has to get back to work. And so they had to delay it, and they punted for 2 weeks. And in that 2 weeks, I'm able to have him retain, and he gets me into a mediation hearing. And in the mediation hearing, this is really cool too, negotiation tactics. They were never able to. So what a mediation is, they have a retired judge. His name was Judge Toth. I'd be in one room with my attorney is how it's supposed to work. And it's supposed to be at the courthouse. And I'm in one room. The district attorney's in another room. I'm with my attorney, and Judge Toth goes back and forth. Okay. I think I should get 8 years. Well, we think you should get 32. Well, I think I should get 10. I think it's basically like horse trading. Okay. Well, we couldn't get our calendars to line up to get it done at the courthouse, so she had to come to the county jail on Martin Luther King Day on her day off. Okay, and she's in there in her pajamas. The deputy district attorney, she's in there in her pajamas. She's absolutely pissed that she's there, and I can see this. I'm like, she doesn't want to be here. I've got 384 years. I've got nowhere to go, and she obviously doesn't want to be here. So I just kept dragging and dragging and dragging.
We discovered years ago the best time to buy a car is right before the staff leaves for a holiday weekend.
Yeah, it's like, go, go, go.
So you're in that mode right now. All right, she's in her pajamas.
She's in her pajamas. It's snowing outside, and she just doesn't want to be there. And so I keep dragging and keep counter-offering, and she loses, and she says, that's it. 15 years with the crime of violence. That's my final offer. No way with the violence in your crime and the assault cases that you've caught in county jail, these 2 extra assault cases, will I ever drop this crime of violence? And so on a 32-year sentence with a crime of violence, you're going to do 24. Okay, so that matters. It's a huge, you're going to do more of your time.
Yeah.
And then on a non-violent, you're going to do maybe a third of your time. Or less, okay? So I'm heavy focused on that crime of violence. Like, okay, we got her down to a decent year range, and I don't know where this came from. It had to have been a God thing. And I looked at my lawyer. I said, you don't tell Judge Toth anything. I said, you walk in there to that district attorney, go tell her that, my client doesn't want to end up in he wants to change his life. He doesn't want to end up in a maximum security prison with swastikas all over his face. He wants to change his life. He's willing to give you a year if you drop the crime of violence. And the way their thing works is like, oh, I get 16 instead of 15, cha-ching. And all of a sudden all that, conviction about crime of violence just went out the window.
So she got a trophy, basically.
Correct. Yeah. And so I gave her the year, which is that's good for her. So she drops the crime of violence, and I get 16 years with no crime of violence is what I ended up getting sentenced to. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
That
I
is
was
crazy. You are into sales.
Yeah. And I was the happiest person ever to be sentenced to 16 years. Like, yay, 16 years in prison. But again, everything's relative when you face it to 32 or 384. Yeah.
All right. You said in one interview I saw with you, I've forgotten, it's some folks that you had known, but they have their own podcast, Emily and somebody else. I've forgotten the guy's name, the husband and wife team.
Chris and Emily, yeah.
Yeah, Chris and Emily. But at one point you said in that solitary confinement where you began having that epiphany about accepting responsibility for your own actions and you're not a victim of that, you felt like God had thumped you.
Yes.
But you still weren't there yet.
Yeah.
But then you started meeting and hanging out with a guy who, in your words, what I saw was he began to drop seeds of the gospel in your life.
100%.
And was that in prison? Was that in county jail? Where was
Prison.
that? That was prison.
Yeah. So here I am. God thumps me on the head and shows me it's my fault.
Right.
Shortly after that, I get into this negotiation hearing.
Right.
My heart's softened to the idea of God and him working in my life.
Because he has been.
Because he has been. And then I get 16 instead of 32, so now I'm looking at getting out in 5 years instead of 24 or never. So I knew God had moved. And so I'm like, okay. But I was always open to God. I always prayed to God. I always knew that God was real. I had some experiences in church growing up that were like bad experiences, but good experiences. I don't know how to really describe it. Like these people had something that I wanted, but I also saw how judgmental and kind of hypocritical that they were. Yeah. And so I was just like, but I knew that God was real. And so I prayed. Like when I was a kid, I prayed. Through my addiction, I prayed. When I was a fugitive, I prayed a bunch. And when I was in county jail, I prayed even more. Wondering about what my sentence was. I knew God was real, but I didn't understand how Jesus factored into it, and no one ever really taught me about Jesus. So I was agnostic. I knew that God was there, but I didn't understand how it worked. Right?
Yeah.
And so I get to the first prison I get to is called Huerfano County Correctional Center, which is in Walsenburg, Colorado. You go in there. You got in Colorado you wear greens, and so you got your greens on. And you've got a couple extra pairs of greens and a couple pairs of state-issued underwear, like a cup and a spoon, and you walk into your unit, and the thing slams behind you, and you're now in your unit. That's got 120 guys in there. And you're like, okay, what's about to happen? Because the new guy comes in, fish, fresh fish, and here comes this big, huge dude with a Semper Fi tattoo on his arm.
Oh, former Marine, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, well, always a Marine, they say. True. I've made the mistake of calling him a former Marine and been corrected 17 times. So, he walks up and reaches out and shakes my hand. He says, "My name's Charles. I'm a Christian, and this is a faith pod." And so all the movies that were going off in my head about the doors slamming and someone coming up to stab me having to fight to see if I was tough, like there's all the things that I thought could have, would have, should have. But this big, burly, huge dude who definitely could have beat me up is like, "My name's Charles. I'm a Christian. This is a faith pod." That wasn't on the, on the bingo card. That's correct. But not on the bingo card. Yep. And I'm like, okay, Charles, what is a faith pod? And he goes, "Man, we do discipleship in here. And, we do Bible studies. We do discipleship. And I take seminary classes on the weekends. And, we do praise and worship every single morning." And they did. And
he's saying words you don't even know.
Yeah, and I'm like, I have to get out of here immediately. That was my response to that.
Put you in the cult ward.
Get me out of here. You ever seen Happy Gilmore when? Anyway, there's the scene with the lady in the old folks' home where she falls and get me out of here. But that's how I felt. I was like, I got to get out of here. But it's prison, and it turns out you can't get out of there. Who knew? And so I was stuck, and it was a good thing. And Charles really just became my friend. He didn't browbeat me. He didn't, he wasn't over the top. He was my friend, and, you get in there, you don't have coffee, you don't have soups, you don't have, sweats, you don't have any of that stuff. And so he gave me, all those things. Like, here, you need some of this, you need some of this. Hey, if you need anything, let me know. So he just became my friend. and his conversation would turn to a subject or a situation. He would kind of Socratically ask me questions.
He would weave Jesus into it.
And he would weave Christ into the questioning and say, have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about that? And I remember one of the funniest ones he did was, this is pre-saved Bryan in prison, okay? And I'm talking about, girls and having sex with girls and all this other stuff. And Charles just looks at me, he's like, but wouldn't it be like so much more beautiful if like you just didn't have sex again until you got married? And I died laughing so hard and just pointing at Charles like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. But you know what? Flash forward, that's exactly what I ended up doing. Yeah. And it was because of that question that happened before I got saved that Charles did. So or go ahead.
No, I got to say, part of my weird resume is that I spent 7 years in full-time ministry with an organization called Young Life.
Yeah.
Which is headquartered in Colorado Springs, by the way. I spent time in Springs because of that.
Yeah.
Love that city. Probably back when you were actually messing up things. But we called it relational evangelism.
Yeah.
It was earning the right to share your faith is what we called it.
Yeah.
And it was not relationship, with a catch. It was relationship with purpose. And also, oh, by the way, if you don't love Jesus, I'm still going to love you.
Yeah.
So it was true friendship. But we earned the right to share our faith, we called it. And there's a passage of Scripture just came to me while we're sitting here talking, hearing you say it. I believe it's in Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians. It says, because we loved you so much, we were content not just to share the gospel, but our very lives as well.
Yeah.
Meaning the gospel's really important, but I'm even going to share who I am in a relationship with you. That's where Charles was, it sounds like.
Yep, 100%.
Very cool. All right, so you're hanging out with Charles.
Hanging out with Charles. We're at Walsenburg, about a year in. I don't remember exactly how it breaks down. He gets shipped to Sterling Correctional Facility. So I'm there on my own. Huerfano County Correctional Center in Walsenburg was a private prison. So it's like Corporations Correction of America, or I guess they call it some other company now, Core Civic. It was one of those prisons, and it got shut down. And so I get moved to Benton County, which is another Core Civic prison. It was Corrections Corporation of America at the time. I'm there for 6 months, and then they moved me to Canyon City, to Arrowhead Correctional Center, which is like Camp Cupcake, okay? And so they moved me to Camp Cupcake, and they didn't know they made a mistake. With my sentence and how much time I have, I'm not allowed to be at Camp Cupcake, right? I'm not supposed to be. And I'm there for like 2 months, and it's up in the mountains in Canyon City, Colorado. I'm like, man, I can get used to this. It was like God gave me a little vacation, and then once they figured it out, they ended up shipping me to Sterling Correctional Facility. I walk out on the yard at Sterling Correctional Facility, which is a massive prison, right? There's 4 separate yards, so I didn't have to land on the yard with him. But I walk out on they call it the 20s yard where I was, and boom, there's Charles.
How about that?
Right away. So
back together again.
Yeah.
Pick up where you left off.
Yeah, and he was a softball coach. That was his way of doing evangelism. He put together a softball team, and it was like, is it? I remember how shocked I was when I walked into a medium security prison. So there's like killers and everything in this prison, and there's a softball team which requires these things called metal bats. I'm like, they have metal bats in prison? Like, that seems counterintuitive.
Who thought this was okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he did. He coached a softball team, and I was the third baseman, and that was his way that he would evangelize guys. And so I get to Sterling, he's like, hey, what was great about Sterling is they had grass. So I was excited to play softball there, but that's neither here nor there. And so he's like, man, you want to play softball again? Yeah. So he's just doing the same thing, friends, ministering, planting seeds. And he goes, man, Bryan, you got parole coming up in a couple of years. You really need to get you some certificates for the parole board. I'm like, great. And he's like, well, I'm the chaplain's assistant. I can get you into some programs. And the chaplain's office was over all the programs, secular or otherwise. I'm like, cool, yeah, get me in. And he gets me into them, and it's they're faith-based programs.
Ah.
And so I got in there, and I'm like, Charles. So I get
snuck
in.
that gospel in on you again.
He did. And but it was really interesting. And I get in there, and the first program was like kumbaya, come as you are. It was very, it was not very high theology. It was not rigorous. It was just like, we want to love on you. But in that program, there was like 5 or 6 other guys that were like Charles, guys who'd been down for like 20 years that were men, and they were steeped in the word. And I got around those guys, and I'm just like, geez, like I'm drawn to this, but I can't admit it. And so that program ends, and I went to Charles. I'm like, hey man, I think I need some more certificates for the parole board. And he's like, okay,
wink, wink, nod, nod.
And so he gets me into this next one, Well, it was very high theology, and it was very rigorous, and it was very much, this is what the Word of God says. It's called The Truth Project with Dr. Del Tackett, which is Christian Worldview and Apologetics.
I got it written down. I was going to ask you about it.
So good. Like, I highly recommend everything Del Tackett does. Everyone should just go and look at all of it. I mean, he did Answers in Genesis. He does The Truth Project. He's got, so many great things. Watch, but this one is Christian Worldview and Apologetics. You come in, you watch an hour-long video, and then you have an hour-long table discussion afterwards. And I would watch the hour-long video that was, very, this is what the Word of God says, this is this, but it's like applying it to creation and politics and culture. And it was
giving you a base.
Yeah, and it was so good. Yeah, so good. But when you're not a Christian, it's not so good, right? And so I'm like, this is bullcrap. I hate this. You guys are stupid. And I did. I told those guys at the table, if you believe this crap, you guys are idiots. You're stupid. And I always tell people, it's like, just because they're Christians doesn't mean they're not convicts, okay? And so, like, you tell someone, even us, like, if someone came up and, like, put their finger in our face and said, you're stupid for believing Jesus, I don't know. I hope that I wouldn't punch him in the face, right? But so here I am in prison doing just that, and Charles is just done. He's just, like, throwing his hands in the air. He's like, oh, my gosh. And so this goes on for, like, 2 or 3 weeks where I'm, like, full tilt arguing with these guys. And we walk back to the unit. And, so here's the education building. Our unit's over here, and there's a sidewalk that you got to walk around like that. And we're walking back, and we get to about right here. And Charles just looks over at me, and he says, Bryan, why don't you give him a chance? Why don't you give him a chance? Jesus being to give him a chance, right? And for whatever reason, in God's sovereignty, as I look at it, that was the moment, okay? And all my guard, all my, defensive mechanisms, for whatever reason, I just said, okay. And kind of as I said earlier, I knew God was real, but I didn't understand Jesus. And he's asking me to give Jesus a chance, not God, but Jesus, which was different. I said, okay. So I went back to my cell and prayed, as I often did. And I said, God, if I need to believe this Jesus character was truly your son, these were my problems with Jesus, okay? And it turns out they're pretty big issues. Said, if this Jesus character was truly your son, that he was born of a virgin, that he lived a perfect, I'm scoffing as I say all this, I'm like, he lived a perfect life, that he died and his death did something for me, and that he rose from the dead. God, if I need to believe that to be okay with you, I need you to show me something, because I'm having a really hard time with this. So I go to sleep that night, and I have a horrible, horrible nightmare. I mean, it was a crazy nightmare, and I still remember, like, a lot of it, which is crazy, but it didn't make a lot of sense what was happening in it, like fat, flashing faces. It even felt demonic. Right.
Well, it probably was.
Yeah. And I'm falling off of a cliff at the end of it. And right before I hit the ground, I wake up. Like when you're falling in a dream.
Real life wake up.
Yeah. Like wake up. Whoa. And the only thing I can see, it's completely dark in the cells. And we have those old red digital clocks. Right. And so the only thing you can see in the room when I wake up is the red digital clock. And it says 3:16. Huh. And the only Bible verse I've ever known my entire life is John 3:16. And it just, boom. Right, and that was the answer to my question, right? For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. You asked, I answered, buddy. It's Sunday morning at 3:16 in the morning. What are you going to do? I guess I'm going to church. So I did. I waited till 8, and I went to Christian services, as they call it in prison, because they have to be politically correct. Went to Christian services, and I don't remember. I sat as far off to the side as I could with my friend Ramon that was on the softball team. Ramon's such a cool dude. He's a giant black dude, just yoked. I'm talking like waist this big, perfect six-pack, pecs this big, arms just huge dude. And I had this thing where, and it was a problem in prison. It's the Ned Flanders Christianity. I don't know if you know what I mean by that. If you ever watched The Simpsons, Ned Flanders. Oh, yeah. Okay, so like okie diddly okie doke. It's like this soft kind of weak, effeminate, gay thing. Like a lot of Christians, they're like nicer than God and holier than Jesus. You know what I mean? It's just a weird thing. And so I always rubbed me the wrong way. But here's Ramon, this dude. Like anyway, I'm not gonna like. He's not that guy. That's what I'll say, right? And he was the guy that brought the blood gang from California to Colorado, cold-blooded killer, until God got a hold of him. And now he's like the prison evangelist. These young guys come in, and he was in Unit 21, which is where you go when you first get to Sterling. And then from Unit 21, you get sent out to all the other buildings. But they kept him in there, and these new guys would come in, specifically young black guys, and he would like body him up and be like, this is the gospel. You know what I mean? And like it was crazy. It was really interesting. So anyway, this is the guy that I went to to go sit in church with because I don't want to be around any of the Ned Flanders guys. You know what I mean? And I wasn't going to let Charles think that he won, you know? And so I sit off to the side in the back. And I don't remember anything Chaplain Davis said. I don't remember what the sermon was on at all. But at the end, he says, all right, guys, we're going to do an invitation. I look over at Ramon. I'm like, brother, what's an invitation? I just knew he was going to be like, brother, that's where you invite Jesus into your heart. But that's not what he said. He said, brother, if you got something hindering your relationship with God, you can go down there and pray with that man about it. And he stepped aside because he already knew that God was on me, as they say in the South. I've learned some Alabama euphemisms. God was on me like a pack of dogs on a three-legged cat. Anyway, so I walk the aisle, as it were, the proverbial aisle, get down there. Chaplain Davis grabs my hand, puts his other hand on my shoulder. He says, Mr. Dawson, how can I pray for you? So look, chap, I'm not here to make any decisions. I just want to pray that God would soften my heart so the truth can come in, because I feel him working on me, but I'm fighting him with everything I have. And we get done praying, and he's just got tears pouring down his face. And Chaplain Davis is not a tears down the face guy. He's not a hugger. He's not a crier. He's just, you know, he's a man. You know, like, and again, like, not like I'm a man and I hug and I cry, but like he's not that kind of man. And to see him weeping in front of 130 inmates, I was like, what just happened? And I count that the moment that God saved me. And so I leave there, and Charles gives me a Bible, Thomas Nelson, New King James Bible. Here you go. And I said, start reading the story of Joseph. And so I get back to my cell, and I start reading the story of Joseph, and I'm hooked. I can't get enough, feasting on God's word. And that goes on for about 9 months. It went on long past that, but about 9 months into me feasting on God's word, really just being shaped and molded by his word, you know, loving it, feasting on it, it changing me. Mm-hmm. About 9 months into that, I look around, and all my friends in there have pen pals. They've got some girl they're writing, right? Yeah. And I'm just like, let's see. So I call my mom. My mom was running a Facebook page for me, and so what that looks like is she logs in, but like the account she logs into has my picture on it, where I'm not in prison. You know, that's my bait. Look, I'm not in prison, but I really am. And so she's running this Facebook page.
So your mom's catfishing for you.
She's catfishing for me, yeah. And we were very unsuccessful at first, and so I say, you know, basically like, look, don't reach out to these girls. They're from my bad past.
It's cool that your mom was doing that for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we reached out to all these girls that were like healthy and went to college and like, you know, weren't drug addicts. Well, I don't know if you know this about healthy girls who aren't drug addicts. They're not real big on writing guys in prison. Like, so those, you know, you have to pick one or the other. You can either have the unhealthy girl that'll write.
I've never studied that, but I can imagine it.
Yeah, no,
okay.
it's there. And so I struck out completely, and I said, okay, God, I can't take any more rejection. If you want me to have a pen pal, you are going to have to do it, because I'm done.
We're talking old school, write it down on a piece of paper, pen pal.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, everybody in there, yeah.
Put it in an envelope, snail mail it out. Yep.
Correct, yep.
And the prison probably has to read your letter to make sure it doesn't say anything, right?
I think they read a lot more of the ingoing than they do the outbound, but it depends. Okay. Like if you're writing from prison to prison, they read both. Like they have some system. I don't know how they do it, but you know, there's definitely people who wrote some stuff they shouldn't have that got in trouble, and I can't remember which direction the mail was going. But you don't seal it. Yeah. You put it in there and it's open. I remember that now that you say that, because I always say, oh yeah, I sealed it, but I actually no, you don't. You put your thing in there and you put your stamp on it and you drop it in the mailbox, and then they go through and open it and look at it and then send it out. So forgot about that now that you bring that up. So no one wants to write me. Said, okay, God, you're going to have to do it. Told my mom I'm done. You know, whatever. And so, I don't know, 2-3 weeks, maybe it was a month, I don't know, it goes by. I say, call my mom just to check in, see how she's doing. And she goes, hey, Brian, do you know this girl named Christina Ewan? I said, yes, ma'am.
You've known her for a long time.
A long time. So Christina Ewan, back in Derby, Kansas, where my dad was. So we grew up together. You know, I was head over heels in love with her, you know, all throughout middle school and high school. We went to 8th grade graduation dance together. After that was the first of many times I professed my undying love to her. And I always say that she gave me the Heisman. It was like, I just want to be friends. Just
friend zone.
Friends. And so I got friend zoned hardcore. And that went on literally from 8th grade to the beginning of 12th grade before I left Derby. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, if you laid out all my yearbooks from kindergarten to 12th grade and said you can pick one girl to marry, it's Christina every single time. She's like, oh, okay, well, so why? And she said, well, she wants to write you. excuse me? So, well, yeah, Christina wants to write you. I was like, does she know I'm in prison? Yeah, she knows you're in prison. Okay, well, that's
Despite the picture on the Facebook page,
yeah,
I actually am in prison wearing greens right now.
Correct. And so that's it. So my mom's, catching the thing where Christina's thinking she's messaging me. So that's how that happened. So Christina is on Facebook, and Bryan Dawson shows up as a suggested friend. And she's like, oh my gosh, I haven't talked to Bryan in 10 years. Clicks, sends a message. And then my mom's like, actually, this isn't Bryan. This is Bryan's mom. He's in prison. To which most women say, oh, dear God, and would run.
Yeah,
but
unfriend.
Not Christina. And she said, well, I'd love to write him. And so, again, I say, God, you're going to have to do it. And God did it, right? I didn't send her a friend request. We didn't reach out to her. She found me and reached out to me.
Yeah.
And my mom said, hey, this is what's going on. She said, I want to write him. So God did that. And so I got her address from my mom and wrote her the first letter, though. And said, look, I didn't get drunk and run somebody's dog over. Like, this isn't like some fluke thing. Like you hear about this weird guy that got thrown, like never did anything wrong.
Oh,
now
really
he's in prison.
for reasons.
Yeah, I belong here. I earned it.
Like real prison reasons.
Correct. And so I said, but God has saved me and I am changed. And everybody in here says that, by the way, but like I'm an open book and I'm willing to prove it to you. And she writes me back. And again, in my mind, she was, the girl that she was in middle school and high school. I mean, she was just perfect, like in every way. She was going to go on and be married to a doctor and the 3,500 square foot house, the white picket fence, and 2.5 kids, and the minivan and the dog. Like that's where she was in my mind. And that's not where she was. And she wrote me back and she said, Bryan, I'm actually in Alabama. I got married and had a son, and my husband and I got divorced. And so she's living in Alabama with her son as a single mom. That's the letter that I got back. I'm like, holy cow. Well, in that letter, she's like, I just got saved 6 months ago. So I've been saved for 9. She'd been saved for 6. And so we just started writing, writing back and forth about what God was doing in our lives, what the preacher was preaching on, whatever. And then she would send me Christian books, and we would read the book together, and then we'd write what we were like reading, and then we would send. It was a really interesting way to.
How long between letters?
It depends. Like you'd send it could be 5 days, it could be 2 weeks. Like the post office is, but it was sometimes like if you sent it Monday, sometimes they got it Friday, but usually it'd be the following week.
Yeah,
it just depends. Yeah, and but it was interesting. And it's like we were like finishing each other's sentences like through written mail, which was really interesting. I thought that was pretty cool. And there was something else I wanted to say that had to do with the snail mail. Oh, I know what it was. So because she had a son, and we had kind of talked about, well, okay, so we've reached this point where it certainly seems like there's a spark that is here that didn't exist when we were kids, but my stock cannot get any lower. Okay. Like I don't have a lot to offer.
It's not like you're taking her to dinner tomorrow night.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
And certainly not a steak dinner. And so I'm feeling like something is happening, but when I was like a football player that everyone liked, I couldn't get her, but here I am in prison. Like, how's this going to work? But I just said, okay, I'm just going to roll the dice. And I wrote her and told her how I felt. I said, I feel like God's doing something between us, sent it. And it took extra long that time.
What year are we in right now?
So this would have been 2011.
Okay.
December of 2011, right. I think, yeah. No, December 2011 is when the first letter happened. Yeah, that's right. Maybe it was 2010. It might have been December of 2010. I got saved in December of 2010.
So you're
somewhere between 2010 and 2011, somewhere in there.
Gotcha.
Yep. When we first start writing, but then we write for about 6 months, and then I tell her, maybe it's 4 months, 5 months, I say, hey, this is how I feel. She writes me back. This was one of those ones, so it took a week for her to get the letter, probably a week for her to write her letter, another week for me to get the letter. Like it was a long turnaround, and it probably was exacerbated by the fact that I'm sitting here with all my hopes and dreams wrapped up in what this letter is going to say when I get it, right? And they call my name at mail call. You've been in the military, you understand mail call. It's a fun time when they call your name. It's not as fun when they don't.
I would say.
Yeah, and they called my name, and I was like, ooh. And I saw it was from Christina, and I was kind of like, oh, God, And she said, Bryan, I feel the exact same way, whether you get out in 10 years or 10 days, I'm going to be here waiting for you, whether, I know God wants me to be with you. I'm just like, what? Unbelievable. And she is and she was. And the funny story about the book she would send me, so after that letter, I don't know, 2 weeks goes by, and I get a book in the mail, and I open it up, and it's like a book on co-parenting for like how to be a stepdad. And my buddy Rich,
Holy cow.
my buddy Richie looks over and he says, "That looks pretty serious, man. He might be in for the long haul." This is that's commitment there.
You said unbelievable a minute ago. It actually is. It's so unbelievable it has to be true.
Yeah,
You
correct.
know,
I mean, it's just, and it's so funny. So I told you my dad's not a believer.
Yeah.
So here he is, his son, who was in the pit of a prison with no hope of ever getting out. Okay, not only is out now, but he's married and has a healthy family, and is now the CEO of a multi-million-dollar media company, and on and on and on and on. Okay, and I'm like, Dad, how does that work without Jesus? And he says, "Well, son, you finally started doing all those things I told you to do."
Oh, well,
I said, "You're right."
Okay.
Ding, ding, ding. You got it, Dad. But I said, "Okay, explain Christina." He said, "Son, I can't explain that. I said,
I was going to say there were so many things. In fact, I was going to interject, but I didn't want to stop your recitation of the story because I didn't want to interrupt those facts. But
Yeah.
but there, like the big black guy who sat next to you the morning you got saved. His name was what?
Ramon.
Ramon. So mine wasn't quite near as dramatic, but it was very similar. I mean, I was a messed up kid, but we started going to church because I live with my dad now.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had what I called the thundering velvet hand. I mean, my dad was 6'4". He was the Army lieutenant colonel. He was the Vietnam vet. And if he said do, you just did.
Yeah.
He also was quick to tell me he loved me, had a different level of discipline. We had a household, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm going to church, have no idea who this Jesus guy is, but I'm sitting there one night on a retreat, and the senior sitting next to me, I'm in 7th grade, and the senior sitting next to me named Mitch Schaefer, I still remember him, and I just, sort of like you, they had an invitation. I had no idea what was going on, but it felt like something I needed to be a part of.
Yeah.
And so I actually looked at Mitch, kind of like you looked at Ramon, and I said, "What's going on right now? What should I do? What do you think?" And he said, "I think if this is something that you're feeling right now, you need to go down there." And I've wondered many times, what would have happened if I hadn't sat by Mitch?
Yeah. It's like God knows what he's doing.
No way of knowing.
Yeah.
Because in my book, at that point, as a 7th grader, I'm sitting next to a senior in high school. It's
Yeah.
like God, Jesus, Mitch. I mean, that's kind
Yeah.
of the order of precedence here.
hierarchy. Yeah.
And I'm sitting next to number 3 in line. And
Yeah.
so I asked him, had I been sitting with one of my 7th grade knucklehead friends, what would have happened? I have no idea. If you hadn't been sitting next to Ramon, would you have asked the question of the next guy? I don't know.
No.
No way of knowing, but God
No.
puts people in your life, in your path, just the right time. Your mom did a Facebook page of all things,
Yeah.
which I'm sure was a thing. Maybe that was something you learned that other people were doing for but the fact that she did it,
Yeah.
and then Christina, who, by the way, you're married to,
Yeah.
and by the way, you have 7 kids.
Correct.
You're not just co-parenting
Yeah.
your stepson, you're
Yeah.
co-parenting all of your kids.
Yeah.
I've met your stepson. He's a cool kid.
Amazing. Yeah.
All right, we got to flash forward a little bit here, just for essence of time. But you did get out, and you went to a halfway house, if I recall.
Yeah, it was an intense behavior modification program, most intense of its kind in Denver, Colorado, called Pier 1.
Yeah.
But it functioned as a halfway house.
Peer, what was it?
Pier, P-E-E-R,
Okay.
1, the number 1.
All right.
Not the furniture store. Different.
No.
Yeah.
You're not buying like bing bag chairs there and stuff like that. All right.
No.
Yeah, I remember hearing you say, like you said a moment ago, that this was the most intense place you could go, that a lot of people didn't want to go there, but you did.
Mm-hmm.
But it also expedited opportunities for you to move forward, right?
Yeah.
And then you asked Christina to marry you, like on the porch of the halfway house.
Yeah, with this ring.
That's super romantic, dude.
Yeah, I'm a hopeless romantic. What could I say? But yeah. So the question that everyone's going to ask at this point in the podcast is, how long were you in? 5 years, 2 months on a 16-year sentence. 5 years, 2 months. I was eligible to put in for a halfway house. Boom.
Right.
I never would have got accepted to a halfway house with my crime and criminal history and how much time I had, except that I put in for this extremely intense behavior modification program, and they're like, "You want to go there?"
Would you have gotten it if you'd had that crime of violence attached to it?
It would have been 5 years, 6 years later. So if I would have got the 15 with the crime of violence, which was what I ended up negotiating on, I probably would have done 8 or 9 years before I could have went to Pier 1.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So it would have been about twice as much time.
Everything stacked up.
Yep.
All
and
right.
so 5 years, 2 months. The way that it works in the Colorado prison system with their time is on a 16-year sentence, they cut it to 8, and that's your parole eligibility date. So in 8 years on a 16, you're eligible for parole. And then on a nonviolent crime, which is why that sentence enhancer mattered, 19 months prior to your parole eligibility date, it's called community eligibility, which is to a halfway house. So 8 years, then 19 months before that, halfway house, and then that actually comes towards you with earn time. So on a 16-year sentence at 5 years and 2 months, that's your first eligibility to get out.
So, I mean, listen, I know that from what you said, Pier 1 is a serious intensive, but you're in a halfway house compared to being in a prison. So did it feel like a vacation almost?
No, prison's way better.
Really?
Yeah, prison is a vacation.
No
Like,
kidding.
and again, like, I mean, it's just a bit like saying prison's a vacation. It's not a good one. But from a standpoint of like, as a man now who has, you know, a wife and children, and runs a company and has to make payroll and like all these type of things, like, you don't have that in prison, right? So it's different. It's like, yeah, you could get stabbed. That's not great. But like, if you know what you're doing, you're probably not going to. I mean, you can step on a landmine, but if you know your way around, you kind of learn how to do time. You can avoid the pitfalls and stuff like that. There's no responsibility, right? And so you're not burdening or shouldering any responsibility.
Wow.
Well, what makes a man what he is the weight that he carries on his shoulders. That's how you develop gravitas and become a man. And so I was never going to become a man in there. I did learn a lot. It did shape and mold, and I had to deal with things or whatever, and it was very good. I think it was good that I went there because it helped me become who I am. But my goodness, like when I first started like being a parent and being a husband and having to work and pay bills,
Wow, yeah.
I was just like, oh my God, send
Real
me back
life.
to prison. This is insane. Real life is way harder than anything. Like, that's what no one ever tells you. Like, it feels like there should be a guy in high school who just sits you down and says, life is flipping hard. It's really hard. Real life is really hard. No one ever tells you. They just make it like it's not. So it's very bizarre. So
My daughter calls it adulting.
adulting,
I
correct.
remember one time she called me because this adulting thing sucks.
It does. That's why so many people aren't doing it anymore.
All right. Okay, so how long were you in the halfway house? When were you actually like free?
2.5 years in the halfway house.
Wow, 2.5 years.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So in the intense behavior modification program, I'm there for the first 6 months. You're in phase 1. You're not allowed to leave. You're not allowed to go anywhere. You're not allowed to really do anything. You can't write. I couldn't write Christina, but she could write me, and she wrote me a letter a week for 26 weeks. Then I get to phase 2. Phase 2, you're allowed to get a job, but you can't go out on visits, so you can go to work. And so I ended up getting a job at a tax resolution firm doing sales. Imagine that. But I mean, there's so many stories, and I know we got time, but so I get to the point where there, but then about 10 months in, I'm eligible to now go out into the community and go on visits and like go see my family and stuff. And Christina flew out.
Are you in Colorado Springs?
This is Denver.
Oh, it's Denver. Okay.
This is Denver. And my grandma had moved to Denver while I was in prison.
Oh, wow.
And now she's back in Colorado Springs. But it's just like another one of those God things.
Yep.
Like she ended up being in Denver where I was, so it ended up working out. So Christina comes to see me, and we plan to get married the next day. So, right, we were wasting no time. The very first visit, boom, we're getting married. So she comes to see me on the front porch. So I'm going to go see her Saturday and Sunday. But she comes by on Friday, and they let her come see me on the front porch of the drug rehab building there. And that's when I got down on my knee and used this ring. There's a story behind that, to ask her to marry me. And for a long time, she had this ring on a necklace that she wore. But I got into a bad situation on the Coosa River kayaking one time, and my wedding band disappeared. And so now I wear this $4 ring that I got, and the reason I got it when I was in the halfway house, Christina's in Alabama. We're 1,500 miles away from one another. Yeah. And I'm a good looking guy, Phil. I don't know if you know that. I'm a good looking guy, and so I had to just like keep these women off of me. And I said, you know what I need? I need a ring to make it look like I'm married. That was my theory, and so I got it. And but I wanted. We're
gonna let that whole story run.
Yeah. So I got this ring, and it was like $40. And I was like, man, I really wish I had that ring. But it says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And I really wanted that ring. And I went back a couple weeks later, and they put it on sale for $4. Well, in the program, you can't keep more than $20 on you at any given time. So I couldn't even save up and get the ring if I wanted to. Well, I go back and there it is. It was in like a Christian bookstore, like I don't know. It was like you have Hobby Lobby, and then right next to Hobby Lobby they have these Christian bookstores. Anyway, went there and got it for $4, and that was the one that $4.
Okay.
And this is what I proposed to Christina with, and then now it's the ring that I wear. It's one of my favorite scriptures. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Joshua
Most
24,
important.
15.
That's it.
We got that
Most important.
We got that engraved in the sidewalk in front of our house.
Amen.
Dude, I mean, we could stop right now, and that's enough of a story. But there's a little more story.
There's a lot. Quite a bit.
And
we're good on time.
Yeah, we're good. You're going to stay right there till we finish.
Okay.
All right. So, what'd you do for work? You get out of the halfway house. You and Christina are now married. Did you go straight into sales? Because I know you met a guy named Lee Habeeb at some point. You're doing radio, and that's where you were coming out of that when I met you.
Sure.
But what were you doing the whole time between?
Yeah. So in Colorado, was doing tax resolution sales, going to church. Met a guy who was in media at church that mentored me. His name's Tim Moranville and his wife Beth. Met them at church, and they just thought the world of me and wanted to help me, and just another person God put in my life that was pivotal. And he was a big media executive at Westwood One and Cumulus. Okay. And he ends up taking another job because he wants to use his gifts to do something meaningful, and he thinks the opportunity to go to this conservative Christian network called USA Radio Networks to help revive it. Back in the 80s under Marlon Maddox, it was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Like Point of View, Kirby, whatever the guy's name was, like 1819 Radio News. It was huge. Well, it kind of died, and there were some guys that were trying to resurrect it. And so they hired Tim, we call him Doc Moranville, hired him to help resurrect it. And he asked me when I moved to Alabama, he said, "Do you have a job when you get to Alabama?" I said, "Well, not one I'm really looking forward to. But I'm open to whatever." And he says, "Great. You're going to be an affiliate relations manager at USA Radio Networks." I said, "Man, that's amazing, Tim. What is an affiliate relations manager and what is a radio network? I have no idea what you're talking about." And he says, "It's sales. You'll be fine." I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll be fine." And so essentially what my job was to take a show like Right Side Radio, and you're on in Huntsville. It would be my job to call a station in Atlanta, call a station in Cincinnati, call a station wherever, and say, "Hey, you've got this 3-hour time slot where you've got this person who sucks. You need to replace this person who sucks with Phil who doesn't suck," right? Like that would be, I'm oversimplifying to make the point, but that's what it is. It's distribution sales.
Right
yeah,
now.
that's right.
Okay.
Use that when you'll get on all
Phil
the stations if you
doesn't
use
suck,
that. That's
so
right.
That's all right. Good.
Correct. There you go. But I was never really good in the beginning. Steve Dace was the first person I ever worked with, by the way. And he was syndicated by USA Radio Networks. Yep. I wasn't great at getting 3-hour radio shows put in place of other 3-hour radio shows. They had a news segment that was really, really good. It was USA Radio News, and it was like when you're going down the road here, ba-da-da-ba-ba, and you hear the news, right? Well, it would, USA Radio News. Did I say 1819 Radio News?
You did a minute ago.
Okay, it's USA Radio News.
You. I knew where you were going. Yeah.
Okay, USA Radio News. So USA Radio News. But the problem was they were so, you get so myopic and rut viewed into what you're doing and what you've always done. This is how we do it because we've always done it this way. And I'm as the military calls an FNG, freaking new guy, okay? I don't know those rules. I'm not in those ruts. And I'm just looking at this and I'm looking at this and I'm like, why aren't you doing this? And so they had a 5-minute newscast was all they had a 2-minute, a 3-minute, and a 5-minute. But the only thing they focused on was the 5-minute, and they marketed the 5-minute newscast that was produced on a Casio keyboard in the 80s to AM news talk stations. And that was what they did, and they couldn't figure out why it wasn't growing. And so I'm driving around Alabama listening to country western music because that's kind of my thing, and I would hear CBS News, ABC News, and I'm like, surely these God-fearing rednecks here in Alabama listening to Hank don't want to get their news from flipping ABC or CBS. So I went back to the team and I said, "Man, what if we make this sound better?" Which they were already wanting to do. And I used the 2-minute version, and I went after FM music stations. And everyone's like, "Man, you are stupid. That's never going to work." And thanks again. I'm like, "God, you guys are so encouraging. I really appreciate it." But I said, "Humor me." They said, "No one's going to drop CBS News and ABC News for USA Radio News." I said, "I think they will. I think the problem is that bad." And so I got on MailChimp and taught myself email marketing, and I had all the contact for all the decision makers all across the country. But I specifically went Bible Belt, country music, classic rock, found those stations, marketed the 2-minute news talk.
So you're making this up as you go along.
Yes.
All right.
This
is not like you picked up somebody's thing and ran with it. This is you created
this is all
a thing.
experimental on my part.
All right.
Taught myself how to do email marketing. Yeah, this was a strategy. And so I sent it out, and MailChimp or email marketing, whatever it is, it tells you, so-and-so in, Missouri opened this 3 times, so-and-so in Alabama opened it 7 times. Okay, that guy's interested. So you got 1,500 people you could reach out to, but when you send out the email and someone opens it 5 times, you're like, well, that guy's interested. So you call him and you say, hey, man, how do you like your news? And they're like, well, we hate it. Like, oh, man, that's terrible. I mean, CBS, like, what? Tell me about it. He goes, well, we like being the CBS affiliate and everything, but at the end of the day, I got 15 angry rednecks calling me I got liberal trash pumping out of my airwaves, and I can't take it anymore. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's horrible. I think I can help. Take a listen. Well, I already listened to it. And he goes, what does it take to sign up? I'm like, just sign the contract and we can start tomorrow.
I have more than once been doing my radio show and had a listener text in and say, you just said something and the news came on and controverted it.
Yeah. We need to get 1819 radio news on WVNM.
Well, we do.
Talk 99.5 carries it. Blue Water carries it. Sean Sullivan carries it.
Why are we not?
Yeah, I don't know. Dale, I know you're watching. So, anywho, so yeah, that was my big launch into media.
Yeah.
Is I had this idea, I executed it, it exploded, and again, like it's like me, I. That's not what you need to hear. God, and I'm not saying like God came down and like split the, but like I stumbled into it. I didn't know what I was doing, and it was like, maybe I should try this, maybe I should try that, and it's like
You're
God
probably
just
better off not knowing what you were doing.
correct, exactly, and God just continued, and like some of the first deals that came in, they were huge stations I had no business talking to. And when I signed it, the network was like, I can't pay you commission on that. It was based off AQH, average quarter hour audience. And I just got a station. I was getting paid $1 per point. And we're pulling in like stations with 200 and 300 AQH. So they're like, here's $200, here's $300, whatever. I had a low salary. Brought in one that had 14,500 AQH. And they're like, what do we do with that? I'm like, that's what you do with it. Anyway, so that happens. So now my name gets out into the industry. I'm sitting there at my campus, another God thing. My phone rings and it's a 601 number from Oxford, Mississippi. Who in Mississippi? Maybe it's a radio station that wants our news. So I answer it. Hello. He goes, hey, Brian, this is Lee. That's not the best Lee impression. He's from New Jersey. He's a Lebanese guy from New Jersey. I don't know how to do the impression. But, Brian, this is Lee, not Habeeb. He says, this is Lee, as though I'm just going to know that that's who that is, right? But interestingly enough, I thought about it, and I said, Oxford, Mississippi, Lee, and it just hit. And I said, oh, my gosh, this is Lee Habeeb. And so Lee is the guy who created Laura Ingram's radio show back in 2001.
Right. Yeah.
He's the vice president of content at Salem. He oversees, he oversaw who is Bill Bennett, Dennis Prager, Hugh Hewitt, Michael Medved, Eric Metaxas, Larry Elder. Okay, he oversees all of that for Salem. He's the vice president of content there. And so he's wildly successful. Everything he's ever touched turns to gold, okay? And he had a new project called Our American Stories.
Right.
And so he calls me, and he's like, hey, this is Lee. I want you to come work for me. That's an interesting phone call. And I said, all I'm thinking about is all my felonies. And I'm like, Lee, I'd like to come talk to you and hear more about your vision. So I go to Oxford, and he's like, you can stay with me. And so he's got this mansion with a guest house, and I go stay in his guest house. And we get to know each other, and I hear his vision, and I'm blown away by it. I'm like, I have to be a part of this, but there's no way he's going to hire me with all these felonies. So we sit down in a little cafeteria in a diner in Oxford, Mississippi, and I share him the testimony I've just shared with you guys. And him and his wife have tears coming down their eyes. He said, you're the exact person I want working for me. And that was it. And so I don't know where, again, total God thing, where the audacity to say this, confidence, whatever you want to call it, he said, I want you to grow my show. And I said, Lee, I don't want to grow people's radio products for the rest of my life. I want to learn the industry. So I'll make you a deal. I will grow your show, but I want you to teach me everything you know about the media industry, every nook and cranny, all of it. And he just laughs at me. He says, okay, kid, you grow my show. I teach you what I know. And we shook hands, and that was it. And so for the next 4.5 years, I sat at his feet learning everything I possibly could about the media industry. And I grew him from, he was on 80 stations when I started, grew it to 330 stations. And then we did a deal with Premiere and iHeart because I kind of laid the groundwork for the deal with Premiere and iHeart by the work I was doing with these iHeart stations. He meets with Julie Talbot. Boom, they sign the deal. Our American Stories is now partially owned by iHeart, which is the goal when you start a syndicated show is for iHeart to pick it up, right? It never happens, though.
Right.
We got it done. It's now the number 10 show in the country. That actually happened 2 days ago. The rankings came out as the number 10 show, spoken word radio show in the country.
I saw him on Laura Ingram's show.
Yeah.
Probably about a year ago, actually. But
yeah,
I mean, they're still tight, apparently.
Oh yeah, very. And but I mean, he's above Mark Levin. He's above Glenn Beck, right? So it's a top 10 show in the country, right? And we took it from no one knew what it was to iHeart to top 10. I wasn't there for the iHeart to top 10. When iHeart picked up the show, my distribution sales, my affiliate relations stuff was done. I grew it as big as I could grow it. Now iHeart's going to take it and grow it. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. So he introduces me. This is July of 2020 when that deal firms up. If you guys remember July of 2020, Summer of Love.
Oh, yeah.
Mostly peaceful protests.
Wonderful
It was good times. Yeah, there was a virus going around. It was mild cold. And there was also a big election going on, if you'll remember. And so Bernie Marcus, one of the founders of Home Depot, who recently passed away, but in 2020 was trying to help Trump get reelected and had like 14 different groups trying to help Trump get reelected. One of them was a group called Job Creators Network based out of Atlanta that was doing a massive media-driven get out the vote effort with like Sean Hannity and Dan Bongino and Ben Shapiro and all these guys, and had to raise $6 million. And we had to execute this massive media-driven get out the vote effort. And so me and one other gal ended up raising the $6 million in like very short order. Raising money for political campaigns much easier than nonprofits.
It's crazy.
It's ridiculous. And so raised $6 million in very short order. And then we had from July to November, blood, sweat, and tears, 80 hours a week, hardest I've ever worked my entire life until starting 1819. But just dog tired, come down on November 4th and watch the election get stolen.
Yep.
And I was just completely disenfranchised with national media, national politics, national fundraising, national. So I went to church shortly after that, feeling the weight of like trying to fix DC was like trying to squirt out the sun with a water pistol. It's just like, it's not doable. And heavy on my heart, I don't know what to do. Like I've all my eggs are in this media basket, and I feel like it's pointless, after that loss. So my pastor starts preaching on localism like a month later. Fathers, fix your families, family being church, church community, community city, city county, county state. Like this is how we win, not top down but bottom up. I'm like,
revival starts here, not out there.
Correct.
Exactly.
And I was like, okay. And so I went home and prayed with Christina. God, how can I use my gifts, talents, abilities, resources, and relationships to make a difference for my people in place here in Alabama? And this is different when I'm telling this story because you were sitting there for it. A week later, I get a call from Caleb Crosby at the Alabama Policy Institute. He says, hey, we've got this guy who's going to start a radio show in Huntsville. Can you help give us some pointers on what we need to do? I said, sure. And so he begins to tell me about Right Side Radio. And he's like, what do you think? And so I kind of turn left here, turn right here, cross this T, dot this I, is what you need to do. And he goes, man, that sounds great. Thank you so much. He says, but what we also want to do in conjunction with building out a radio show, we want a statewide, state-focused news and multimedia company that can take out AL.com and can also source content so the radio show can talk about the journalists out, get the news, and then the news gets broadcast by the radio, right? It's this symbiotic relationship. And I said, I'll do it. And he said, well, I was hoping you were going to say that. And so there began the opportunity to create 1819 News. And, this is the dirty little secret I haven't told very many people in public settings. I didn't even read newspapers. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no clue. Like, I didn't understand.
Well, I'd never done radio before.
Correct. And so I'm a radio guy doing news. You're a lawyer and a senator and a military guy doing radio.
Makes
so
no
we're
sense.
all figuring it out. But I didn't know much about publication. I understood the business side of media, though, and I understood cultural architecture. And I understood the power of media. I understand how media shapes culture and culture shapes politics. Like I got that. I understood a lot of but as far as news and publication, I didn't. And so I've had to hire excellent people and have since learned a ton about it. But I wasn't going to let that opportunity go. When someone calls you and is like, hey, do you want to start a news outlet for the state?
No,
Yes.
And God put some amazing people, because since I know them,
Yeah.
I mean, I know the majority of your crew.
Yeah.
And some of them come on my show on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You surrounded yourself with some quality people.
Jeff was, I could say that about so many people on the team. Jeff Poore, that was when 1819 became real, legitimate, and serious. Is when we made him the editor-in-chief. Talking about a guy who worked for Tucker Carlson, directly for Tucker Carlson. Steve Bannon came and personally hired Jeff Poor away from Tucker Carlson. Talking like two of my favorite guys. Okay, Jeff worked directly for them, and then I was able to hire him away. Steve Bannon brought him to Breitbart, and I was able to hire him from Breitbart to be the editor of 1819 News.
Yeah,
total God thing, and he's killed it. He is. There's no one else that could do that job in the state.
I think it must have been you. Somebody told me at one point you were sort of shopping for the guy who was going to be the editor-in-chief, and somebody said to you, "Why are you looking at other resumes when you got Jeff Poor in your backyard," or something like that?
I was told that about 20 times. So we were literally pounding the phones looking for people.
Oh, so it took convincing.
Yeah, it took some convincing. But what's funnier, and this is a shout out to April Marie Fogel. So her and I didn't start off on the best foot. Now she works for us, and she's an absolute assassin.
Right.
She's unbelievable. Unbelievable. She's so good. I heard that she was going to write a hit piece on 1819 News. We're talking 3.5 years ago, okay? So I call her, and I ask her, like, hey, heard you're going to do a hit piece on us. I'm an open book. And she's like, who are your donors? I'm like, not answering that one. But other than that, I'm an open book, right? We need to protect our donors. Anyway, and so she says, so she asked me all these other questions, and, man, she's just hammering me, like beating the crap out of me. And at the end,
who's
she's
she
like,
working for at the time doing this?
She had Ale Today, her own little publication or whatever,
Yeah.
and then she
That's
could have
right.
published it anywhere. But at the end of it, she's like, "Well, who's your editor?" And went into who it was, and she's like, "Why is he your editor?" Da, 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 da. And she goes, and she was the first one to say it. She goes, "You know who needs to be your editor is Jeff Poor." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh," because he was writing for us at the time, but it was like just like he'd throw in a couple articles a week or something. He wasn't way high up, and I'm like, he's never going to leave Breitbart to come work for me.
And he's got his own radio show.
Correct.
Mobile.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like he's not going to do this. I go see him in Fairhope, and he's like, "Yeah, no, I saw the job posting. I was hoping you were going to say something." You know what I mean? And my vision was, I want to take all of the skills that I learned in national media and apply it to my state to fix my state. You know what Jeff told me? We went down to Fairhope and we had lunch. And he said, "Man, I've had all this national media success and experience." He's like, "I want to take everything I've learned and I want to change our state." So like verbatim what my vision and mission was, and I'm like, whoa. And so we hired him, and it's been.
Well, I can speak from the outside looking in. It was a great decision.
Yeah,
I mean, it just absolutely was. And you guys were already killing it, and then he came on, and I think he just added to it in such a way that turbocharged it. All right, you guys have built a platform. All right, so first of all, I will say this: having been a former state politician, now a recovering state politician.
Yes.
I can tell you that there are people in Montgomery who the first thing they do when they get up in the morning is open up to see what people are saying about me. Mm-hmm. Because they live for the affirmation or the, oh gosh, I got to fix the misconception, or they're not their own person. Their identity is being elected, and so they swarm to the idea. And then there's the others who want to know what the general sense of things is in our state, because before I vote on the bill, I gotta, and then there's those who are there's a deep state in Montgomery.
Oh yeah.
Who are checking to make sure no one's exposing the deep state.
Yeah.
And then there's a lobbyist group who are making sure the bill's not getting maligned. And then, it's on and on and on, but they were all sourcing it from the same, just ragged pieces.
Yeah.
And I'll name them. AL.com and Alabama Political Reporter were awful. Yellowhammer at the time was probably the premier that we could go to and feel like we weren't going to get just maligned or slimed.
Yeah.
But you guys came along with 1819, and I will just tell you right now, outsider looking in, y'all are the go-to now.
Yeah.
And this has been, 4 years?
Exactly 4 years.
Yeah, 4
July
years.
1st.
Yeah, so we were 4 years on the air last week,
Yep.
and you guys are 4 years out in the world.
Yeah.
But I'll just affirm that. I really think that you guys have just nailed it. Still more to do.
Yeah.
But you have nailed it. And, here's AL.com now having to paywall everything and laying their staff off, and you guys keep growing.
Yep.
I think there was a hunger for truth in news reporting.
Who knew?
Who knew? All right, let me do this. I gotta move forward. I mean, now that I've blown all that smoke up your skirt, let's talk about one of the hardest things that I know you guys have been through.
Yeah.
In a few minutes here, November of 2023.
Yep.
Guy named Bubba Copeland.
Yeah. Great guy.
Down in Lee County. Yeah. Was living dual lives, portraying himself one way during the day living a very awkward, prurient lifestyle after hours, and the story dropped in your lap, and y'all decided to run with the story, and you made national news for all the reasons you'd rather not, because he wound up taking his own life.
Sure.
You and I were talking last night at dinner. That was not just a news story. That was a cultural episode for you guys at 1819. Tell me a little bit about that, the decision-making to actually run with the story and the aftermath, and any thoughts on it since.
Sure. That situation was you have situations like prison was for me. It was make or break. You have in an organization, you have these moments which are existential crises that you go through where this is either going to make us or it's going to break us. But if it makes us, we're going to be galvanized and unified and battle tested. But if we're not, it's going to break us. And that was a make or break. And so there's a story behind it. I had a World War II pilot. This is the short version of the story, who flew P-51 Mustangs. And about 3 or 4 years before I started 1819 News, God gave me this story. I won't go through the whole story. But essentially, I'm in his house. He lives with his son, and his son is a pastor friend of mine. And I was looking at this P-51 Mustang replica. Well, Bill Brown, he was shot down in the Battle of Iwo Jima. His plane was ripped to shreds by anti-aircraft artillery. He crashed in the Pacific Ocean. And he was rescued by an American submarine in enemy waters, right? Unbelievable. So I'm wanting to talk to him. Well, I never really got the opportunity to talk to him, but we're about to leave, and I'm looking at this P-51 Mustang replica, okay? And he's 92 years old, and he's in a motorized wheelchair. I'm looking, just fascinated by this propeller plane that he flew in one of the greatest battles in our nation's history, and what it would be like to be in a propeller plane having it ripped to shreds by anti-aircraft artillery, you know. Yeah. And he rolls up beside me, and it kind of startled me. And I looked down. I said, he says, Brian. I said, yes, sir. He said, Brian, there was a time when we did what was right, even if they shot bullets at us. He said, Brian, there's coming a time in your life when you're going to have to do what's right, even if they shoot bullets at you. And he rolled off. That is our motto at 1819 News. We're going to do what's right, even if they shoot bullets at us. And it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to do it, okay? And that moment, we had to make that decision. And so we find out that this guy who is a mayor of Smith Station, he is the pastor of First Baptist Church.
This is the Bubba Copeland we're talking about.
Yeah, Bubba Copeland.
Yeah. First
Baptist Church, Phoenix City.
Yep.
And he's living a double life as an online trans porn star, okay? I am a worldview guy, and call it what you will, whatever. Not only was he an online trans porn star, he was writing homoerotic slasher fiction. I didn't know that was a genre until this, okay? And what that means is he's writing stuff where it's obviously like, depicting homosexual sexual fantasies that is just sick. And then he's also talking about killing people in these writings. I didn't make it that far into reading it, okay? Craig did. And shout out to Craig. Craig is the most. Craig Monger is the guy is unbelievable. I mean, this story embodies how unbelievable it is. But all of our huge, bombastic, heavy hitting stories, 80% of the time it's going to have Craig's name on it, right? And this one was no different. And he had to read all this stuff. I read one paragraph, and I knew that he was having sex with all the kids in his church just by reading that first paragraph. Okay. It was sick. He was, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to go too far into it, but he was literally just describing what it was like to have gay sex in this first paragraph and how wonderful it was and everything else, and just crazy detail. And I'm just like, oh my gosh.
And by day, he's a pastor at First Baptist Church.
Correct. And then also the mayor of Smith Station.
And mayor of Smith Station.
And it is just like, whoa. And then we found he has these memes on a social media account. And the meme is a picture of a boy, and then it looks like the boy transitioned into a girl. And so it's a meme that's encouraging children to transition their gender. And it says, get the shot, take the jab, become the whore, on this meme that he's encouraging children to transition their gender. Well, we published that. Well, the parents reach out and was like, hey, could you take my kids down? Those are your kids? Those are real, those are real people. He's like, yeah, no, we're in the community. That's my 14-year-old son and my 17-year-old daughter. Could you please take them down?
I didn't know that part.
Yeah. So he's taking pictures of kids in the community, making memes about transitioning, making it look like this boy transitioned into this girl when it was a brother and a sister. I mean, I could go on for hours.
He was using real people
in his community.
Now, I know he was doing that in his writings too, wasn't he?
Yes, in his writings.
People's identities too.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we have all that. That was what convinced us to write the first story. Was some of the writings we didn't know about, the writing to talk about killing and all that stuff. We just saw the heinous perversion in the writing. We saw the meme encouraging children to transition their gender. He's a pastor, so these were kind of the facts. And Jeff and I sat up. I think that was a Tuesday night until like midnight playing devil's advocate. Well, if we publish, this is what'll happen. What about this? Like, just basically, we understand the power of what we do, and we don't take it lightly.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to say is in talking to Jeff later. I don't know if I don't think you and I've ever talked about this in detail, but Jeff and I have talked about it some, and he stressed how this was not a flippant decision. This was not just another story. This was actually, y'all had some editorial meetings about this to decide whether we're really going to hit publish.
Yeah, and what it all boiled down to, out of all the questions and conversations and devil's advocate and potential scenarios, Jeff's like, Bryan, if that was your church and your kids went there, would you want to know?
Yeah.
And we said, we're publishing. That's what we did, and so we published it on Wednesday morning. Wednesday night, he gets in the pulpit of First Baptist Church, Phoenix City, and he defends himself and downplays it, and like it's no big deal. Jeff didn't take very kindly to that, nor did I, nor did Craig, and so we dripped out 3 more stories, each getting worse and worse. Maybe it was 4 more stories. And I
remember you had to put some graphics in there too to make sure that people knew this was real.
Yeah. And they were like, you're sensationalizing the story. I said, no, the story's sensational. Like that, don't get it confused. Like, we're not sensationalizing, we're reporting on a sensational story. Like, this is insane.
Yeah.
And so we published some more stories. Well, the 4th story was the homoerotic slasher fiction, and where we got that terminology from. There's a woman in the community, and he used in this slasher fiction, he used her real name and the name of her business, which was in his community. Was actually she was friends with his wife. Uses her name and the name of her business and says that he's going to stalk her so that he can mimic her every move, so he can transition into her identity, kill her by throwing her off of a Carnival cruise ship, okay? Kill her so that he can have sex with her husband, okay? So we published that story. And, of course, now from the first story we published, it immediately went national. New York Times, Fox News, Daily Wire, everyone is talking about it now. Yeah. So by the time that 4th story hit, it gobbled up the news cycle from that Wednesday to that Friday. That was all anyone was talking about in national media. Right. What is going on in Alabama? And we knew that was going to happen. That's why we were so cautious to publish it. But once we did, it was all in. And so now all there's national media, and this story breaks. The Lee County sheriffs are like, we need to go do a wellness check on this guy. They go to his house. He's not at his house. And so they're leaving the neighborhood, and they see him in his car. So they turn their lights on to pull him over just to check on him. Well, the lights come on, and he takes off. He thinks he's going to prison for probably all the, who knows? I mean, this is conjecture here, but all the things he could have, we know what he did, and, but he doesn't know what we know that he did, and he probably did a lot more things that we didn't know.
I was going to say.
Right, so that mind.
There's more stacked in that we don't even know about.
Yeah, the wicked flee when no one pursueth, right? And so they turn their lights on, he takes off, and they get into a chase. Chase comes to an end. He pulls out a pistol, waving it around. I'm not going to take this anymore. Puts the gun to his head, pulls the trigger, kills himself. Okay, so now that's not the intended goal. The goal was to see him, step down, get help. He chose to do that. Now the problem with him choosing to do that is that the New York Times, and the Washington Post, and AL.com, and the Guardian, and the Daily Beast, and every other liberal rag in the nation blames Bryan Dawson, Craig Monger, and Jeff Poore for killing him.
Well, and I want to stress, too, one of the things you told me last night, I knew that there had been liberal backlash.
Yeah.
I did not know your personal homes and families had been stalked and doxxed.
Yeah.
So I missed that, or I'd have been praying about that specifically. I just knew you guys were getting just beat up in the press, but I didn't realize people wanted to beat you up for real.
Yeah, no, so it started with we had protesters show up at our building. I guess that's to be expected. Protesters showed up at our building. We had to hire security to be in our building. Alabama Unfiltered broadcasted from another studio for a couple days, and
for the record, y'all are headquartered in Scottsboro or someplace like that.
That's right.
That's
right. Somewhere far, far away from Birmingham. But there was protesters. But then what was even weirder is when the Alabama Unfiltered team came back, they walked out the back door, and there was weirdos sitting there filming them. And when Allison looked, one of them kind of stared him down, and they freaked out and got in their car and drove off, and were taking pictures. It was just the whole thing was just very, very bizarre. And there was all kinds of weird stuff going on. And so it was high tension, moment for us with that. But if that wasn't enough, online pictures of my family with all my children with my home address underneath were being posted all over the place with threats of killing my kids. Same thing happened to Jeff. They reached out to Jeff's wife's law firm, making all these crazy accusations and everything about her because she's married to Jeff, and thankfully she works at a good law firm doesn't not dumb, so it didn't affect. But they came after her. They came after Jeff, threatened Jeff's kids, and then Craig, same thing, threatened him, threatened his kids. Craig got it the worst, and again, he got it the worst all the way around. He's the one that had to read all that stuff. He's the one that his parents got thrown under the bus. His parents had like a bankruptcy or something, and then they tried to basically say that, the reason he did this was for money so that he could pay for his parents. But just insanity, okay? But all kinds of stuff, all kinds of threats, and it was relentless, and it kicks back up every now and again. Like, months and months and months, years will go by, and then all of a sudden, Esquire, I think, was the publication. I could be wrong on that, but I think it was Esquire. Maybe a month or 6 weeks after the Bubba Copeland thing happened, they came in and did a big puff piece on what a great man Bubba Copeland was and how sad it was that the right-wing media killed him and all this stuff. Well, that the Esquire, puff piece ended up winning a Pulitzer. And when that Pulitzer announcement came out, there was a whole other, round of backlash against us or whatever. But getting back to it, so we all experienced, and it wasn't just me, Jeff, and Craig. I mean, like, we had every single person on our team was getting people, because we used to have all of our staff on our website, like most companies. And then now every single one of those people was being attacked on social media and threatened and everything else. Yeah. And so the whole team really had to deal with it. But, Craig took it the worst, and then me and Jeff, and then the rest of the team. But it was, it was horrible, death threats, all that. But then, I don't know, it calmed down after about 3 or 4 weeks. And then about 3 or 4 weeks after it calmed down, I had a friend come in and say, "Man, Bryan, what would you do? What would you do if another story like that came across your desk?" And I was like, my knee jerk was like, and then I heard Bill Brown in my ear. He said, "You do what's right, even if they shoot bullets at you."
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you.
Yep.
In the aftermath, in the hindsight piece, because hindsight being 2020, but at the same time, I think part of wisdom is assessing where you've been and making sure you know where you're going.
Yep.
Would you do it again?
Nothing different.
And if another story of a similar nature or something that could be just as impactful came across your desk?
Same. Yeah.
And I think that's what makes y'all a news organization.
Yeah.
I can distinctly remember when Yellowhammer was what 1819 is now to us in Montgomery before y'all ever created. Yellowhammer is the one that broke the story about Governor Robert Bentley.
Yeah.
And it sucked the oxygen out of Montgomery.
Yeah.
But it was also real.
Yeah.
And I recognize that, that there were issues in his life, some of which may have been exaggerated in the press or whatever. I knew Robert Bentley personally, but there was enough there that we actually saw the governor step down.
Yeah.
And I don't think Yellowhammer ever regretted running a real story.
Yeah.
And I thought that was bold.
Yep.
As much as it was painful to Montgomery, as much as it was painful to have our state maligned in the national media, as much as it was painful to have to be there, I was the one who put together the articles of impeachment.
Yeah.
I was tasked with doing that as a senator. It was still a story that was a real story.
Yeah.
And I don't think it had near the personal backlash to Yellowhammer that y'all have experienced with the Bubba Copeland story, but I'm proud to hear you say, before you leave, you're going to get one of those bulletproof influence classes from me that we have. You need
Love
it. I gotta begin to wrap this. 1819. Let me ask you this: y'all are growing. You're still there. You got good things going on. Tucker Carlson's going to do your dinner with you in November this year. What's next for 1819?
To us, it's relentlessly pursuing our journalistic reach and impact. We want to be the premier. We already are. Like, again, anyone who's paying attention to what's going on in the state, we're the place to be. However, AL.com is still considered the outlet of record, right? The news outlet of record, the paper of record, if you will, even though they don't print papers anymore. They're the outlet of record, and so we want to replace them as the outlet of record. We want to be it, right? And so total dominance in the state is the only thing that we'll settle for.
The trick's going to be not becoming the AL.com.
Yeah, and
Don't get comfortable where you are.
there is a and people are like, oh, they're right wing. It's like, and like, would you rather not be?
It's a red state.
Yeah,
At the same
and
time,
even if it's like, so there's a thing that the kids say. You talked about adulting earlier. Another thing that the kids say is based. Yeah. Okay, they're based. Well, what is based? It means it's based in reality. If something is based in reality, that means it's right wing. Okay. You can't cut kids' genitals off. Like, actually, we don't do that. Right winger. Okay. Ooh, but the saying goes, any organization that isn't explicitly right wing will eventually become left wing. And so we are explicitly a right wing organization. What does that mean? Does it mean we're like crazy psychopath lunatics like they try and paint us out to be? No. It means that everything we do is based in reality. Like, we're looking at things as they actually are. And there's the entire world, flesh, and the devil, and the prince, the power of the air that we're fighting and is up against, trying to spread lies, and we're unwavering in truth.
Well, but and the other piece of that too is truth.
Yeah,
Truth's still truth.
truth.
You don't have the luxury of living your own truth. There's only one truth. You don't get to live your own truth. And then truth be told, if you look at it, like Libs of TikTok became famous not because it was doing something unusual. It was just showing the world what libs were saying about themselves.
Correct.
So you guys just keep reporting what's there. In other words, you didn't hide what the left was doing. Next thing you know, you're right wing because of it.
And us being right wing in a red state, who would you say is an outside observer? Who do we attack more, Republicans or Democrats?
Probably Republicans.
By far. Like, it's like in 90-10.
Because you have higher expectations.
Correct. We have higher expectations. We don't have a Democrat problem in Alabama. We have, we have communism is seeping into our state, but it's not rooted like it is in some other states. So we have to keep an eye on the communism and make sure we don't get radical Islam taking over and trying to create schools like they're trying to do. But what we have is an establishment Republican problem. That's what we have is people that they just want government to serve them, and if they need to be a Democrat for that to work, they're a Democrat. But if they need to be a Republican for that to work, and those are most of the people in positions of power in the state. But we're seeing that break with the people that you see running for governor. Okay, with Tommy Tuberville. You've got two great candidates running as Attorney General right now, Catherine Robertson and Jay Mitchell, both amazing. See Andrew Sorrell and Caroline Dobson. You have two great people running in that race. And I anticipate seeing Barry Moore. I don't know whether he will or not, and Steve Marshall for that United States Senate seat. Barry Moore and Steve Marshall. How do you lose? Yeah, you see what I'm saying. So we're in this radically different situation. I think what you do plays a part in that. I think what we do plays a part in that. Yeah. What Trump's done. I mean, God is doing something with all of us. Yeah,
we got a deep bench.
Yeah,
but you want the right bench. Yeah,
correct. We've never had a bench, at least since I've lived here. It's just been a bunch of establishment people going against other establishment people, with like one guy who gets like 7 or 12, points that runs, the good guy. Like Tim James is like amazing. Love Tim, but I don't think. What did he ended up with percentage wise?
Well, it's crazy too, and I hesitate to say this because I don't want Democrats to have power again. But I was part of the class that flipped the state house for the first time in 136 years, and we came in there, we came in with a passion, with a purpose, and then 8 years later, 30% of us decided we were done because everything we said we were going to do got done. Yeah. And I said on my show yesterday, part of my deep concern right now for Republicans in this state is they don't have the battle scars of the fights that we had 15 years ago. Yeah. 15 years ago, we were slugging it out with the teachers union. We were getting doxxed every day. We had people showing up at our houses, and I had death threats I had to file with the sheriff's office and, whatever else. And now we have a whole lot of Republicans who have no calluses on their hands because having an R by your name is all you got to do. Yeah. And I don't want the Democrats to come back, but you do rise to the level of your competition.
Sure.
And without a challenge right now, they can run one way and be another way, correct, and no one can ever get them out of office.
So two things to fix it. So you got, unchecked power is bad whether it has an R or a D by its name. Unchecked power is bad whether it has an R or D by its name. We can either have a Democrat Party check the Republicans, or we can have media check the Republicans. Like, I'll take good media. And so you and I are here to do that.
Perfect. Yep. All right, let me wrap you, bud. Right. You got to get on the road pretty soon, and I appreciate your time. I had a couple of questions, but I'm going to ask you two of them. One is I would just lead off by saying, forgiveness doesn't mean there's no accountability.
Sure.
In your life, you've had a lot that you've overcome. The God is obviously a God of great forgiveness. You've got a beautiful life, a full life right now, a very full house. But what, if any, effects do you still feel from the old Bryan's life? Do you still have days when there's something that you're working through, or something you're putting aside, or something you're dealing with?
That's a wonderful question. It's sometimes I'll be on my knees praying in the morning, and God will like take me in a time capsule or like a time traveling machine, and like I will like viscerally relive some of the things that I did when I was a very bad criminal, and I'll like experience those things again, and then I come back to where I am, and it's like He's showing me, this is where you were, this is where you are. Mm. And this sounds crazy. I'm not an overly charismatic guy in my faith. I lean Reformed Baptist Presbyterian. But I feel that God saved me for what I'm doing. Because I was just in prison rotting. I was going to be there the rest of my life. Instead, He decided, very much like the prodigal son, where He says, grab the finest robe, put shoes on his feet and a ring on his finger, and slaughter the fattened calf. Okay, here I am in prison. And I come out, here's the most beautiful woman in the world, here's 7 healthy children, and now you're the CEO of a media company. Like, why? And so I'm just trying to thank God, live faithfully, put one foot in front of the other, love my wife, train my children to love the Lord, and be fearless in my pursuit of truth. That's it.
And take none of it for granted.
Yep.
Last question, which you may have just answered, actually. I ask this to everybody that I've done these long forms with.
Sure.
40 years from now, your grandkids see this video. What do you want the takeaway to be?
That's actually a really good question. Generational vision is one of the most important things to me. Both the ones that came before us and then the ones that are going to come after us. I think our society has gotten away from that, and so this is a wonderful question. I want my grandchildren 40 years from now to look back and see, God's wonderful work of grace in my life, and know that, God is real. He's King of Kings. He's Lord of Lords. He's a God of restoration. But, you don't have to go smoke meth and beat people up, to find Him. You can, my hope for my testimony for my children and grandchildren is like, well, I can't remember a time when I didn't know Jesus. Like, that's what I want for them. So I want them to know that, I was thinking about them with every risk I took since being saved and moving into this part of my life. Every risk I took, every decision I made, everything I'm doing, I'm trying to build something for them, right? The Bible tells us that a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And I don't want it just to be merely financial. I believe if you leave your children an inheritance that's financial without spiritual, they'll squander it. And so first, I want to hand down a spiritual inheritance with a love of God, a love of singing, a love of instrument. Like, I want like a rich Christian heritage to be handed down to my children and children's children. But I also, hope that I can leave them something of value as well from a financial perspective. So,
appreciate you.
Yep. Thanks, Phil.
Hey, hope you guys enjoyed that one. Listen, check out our YouTube channel. Find us at Right Side Media. We're also on all of our social media platforms, and you can also find us at rightsidemedia.org. All of our content, just click subscribe, follow, or like, and we'll see you next time on Just Right.